Dajaha. Hi guys, it's Jeanet and welcome back to my channel. And today we are back with Brittany to finish off what was supposed to be one video, but then we had so much to say about the first three episodes of Devil Judge that we kind of had to stop it because I was about to fall asleep. So, anyway, today we are going to be focusing on episode 4 to 8 of Devil Judge. And once we get to it, we shall also do episode 9 to over on Brittany's channel, so I will be leaving those linked below once they do appear. But for now, it's just this one, and if you've missed the first one, I will link it up here. But for anyone who doesn't know, Brittany is an amazing reactor. I absolutely adore her reaction so much that I am, in fact, a patron, and I had to physically restrain myself from continuing to watch The Devil Judge and Beyond Evil because we have to have things to talk about, and I can't go into it knowing every single thing that she thinks about the characters. So, yes.
Episode 5. Episode 4. Sorry. I keep thinking we got through episode 4. We did not.
We did not.
Episode 4.
Oh,
I have notes because episode 4 is a big one. For a lot of reasons, both plot related and homosexually speaking. Because like things just be happening in episode 4.
Just a little bit.
Right? And then like a lot of things really kick off with episode 4, like the found family kind of dynamic kind of starts to come together a bit because you have the beginnings of the whole food thing and Kim preparing food.
Yes.
And kind of the contrast between what happens what it looks like when Kim and Yohan and Elia like sit down and have a meal together versus whenever like the super rich and shitty elites are having a meal together, and like the two extremely different vibes. That kind of really starts to take off here.
And also I was like, because obviously last time I didn't have any of my pretty pictures prepared for references. So this time, as I was skimming through, can we just take a moment of appreciation for Johan's actor having chemistry with a literal, like, Alexa?
Yeah, what is that? who has an Alexa Butler thing as a scene partner and then pulls it off like that's another person in the scene? When there's barely, I don't know, man. Ji-sung he should be studied. I'm concerned about that man. That's not normal.
It was so good.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
No, yeah, the whole dynamic with him and the butler. That there is a dynamic in the first place. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't.
Oh,
but it also, at the same time, you're like, how is this happening? And yet it makes complete character sense for Yohan, because you're like, this man is so lonely that he has a relationship with his essentially Alexa, which is,
but also the fact that he's so socially awkward.
Yeah.
That he could only have a friend as a robot because the robot can't judge him.
I know that was one of the most surprising things about Yohan, is that when you enter his house, even just like in episode 3, like when you enter his house and they really just start very frankly showing you who Yohan is, even though you're doubting everything at that point. Yeah, the social awkwardness, the tripping over Elia's wheelchair, the the whole dynamic he has with Elia, the very just a completely different side to him that I was not expecting from a character like that, because we usually don't get that kind of three-dimensionality from a character like him.
Yeah. And the way he ran out of that kitchen when he was caught eating Gohan's food by...
You're like, I'm sorry, you're the devil judge who's currently plotting to overthrow the corrupt Korean government, and you are terrified of this maid who raised you and letting her know that she's a terrible cook. Like, the range that Yohan has is rather remarkable. What else? I have like so many notes for every single freaking episode. You know, we had Yoan taking Judge O to an event. Like there are a lot of gay things happen in this show, and I am overwhelmed by all of them. But there are two things specifically that I every time I watch it, I'm like, I just can't believe they did that. I can't believe they committed that to film. One is the closet scene, and two is a thing that I will mention when we get there much later towards the end in like episode 15 or something. But the closet scene is one of them. Every time I watch that scene, I'm like, this is not happening. It's just not. Especially given the context that we're not even aware of yet.
There was a lot to unpack with that. And also, like, one of the things that we got directly after, like, I will go back to the closet scene, because the closet scene has a lot that we need to talk about.
So much.
But also the fact that we got a power couple walk after the exit of the closet.
Yes. We got a runway of this new power couple.
And a look back.
That we did not get with Yoan and Judge O. This was like not something applied to like every... No. Yeah. The power arc was kind of nuts. And just going back to the costuming, the fact that Kim has that white coat on over the black tuxedo, which leads to an adjusting of the collar moment, which is my weak spot.
Yes.
Adjusting of the collar, adjusting of the tie, what have you. Literal actual weakness. It's one of those, you know, incredibly like cliche tropes that I will fall over for every single time.
Especially when it's like queer coded. Like, it's also all well and good during things like, I think Ken Porsche did the tie scene as well.
Moment, yeah.
But it's so much more rewarding in things like Killer and Healer, where, you know, you're not expecting anything that's a gift like that. So this was...
Yeah. It's the shows in which it has to operate on subtext that getting something like a tie moment really just jumps out and punches you in the face.
Yes. Or do you have anything else that you want to say about the closet scene? Because I have a decent amount.
Just the fact that...
No pressure.
That it was another, like... I mean, the whole thing from top to bottom. But just the fact that, like, we don't have... It's yet another scene, and there are so many. Essentially the entire show. It's yet another scene where you go back in hindsight, and you're like, that's what that actually meant. That's what that moment really meant. And bravo for the show being like, yeah, we don't care if on first watch this looks extremely homoerotic, but technically, if you know, then you know that Yoan is referencing something plot related, like his back, and how his back hasn't healed while Kim's has. They do that.
Yeah, because that was the focus of the scene completely. Yes.
Yeah. And they do that a couple of times where they're like, yeah, we know this looks extremely gay on their first meeting. It happens a lot. I just love that the show is not scared to be perceived as unbelievably queer at any given point in time. And it just astounds me. Other than just generally not being able to like be terribly coherent about the closet scene. There's not much more I can articulate other than, oh my god, and what it leads to. Ma'am, take it away.
Okay, so I have like two reference images here, shall I say? But the one, which is, in my opinion, kind of like the most important one, because I have an entire theory about jewelry and the function of jewelry in the show.
Oh, shut up. I haven't even thought about that yet. Tell me,
And this is where it starts, sort
Uh-huh.
of. Okay, so there's 3 important pieces of jewelry throughout the show. The first one is Kang Isaac's necklace.
Yes.
The second one is Kang Isaac's watch and kind of like the representation of said watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one is, in my opinion, Judge O's necklaces.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have at the end of the previous episode, we had Kanyohan taking the watch from that was his brother's from the guy who stole it originally. So that's the first time that the watch is like really introduced, that we know what the meaning is of him going and looking around at people's wrists when he was there in the slums and everything like that. And there's immediately kind of the same weight to that watch that there is to the necklace that was Kang Isaac's necklace. And even though the watch that that is depicted in the first image that I shared with you, even though it's not the same watch, I checked, I double checked, I scoured. It is not the it is not the same watch.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, if she's about to tell me it's the same damn watch, I'm gonna go feral. But yes, no, continue.
It's not the same watch, but the thing is, symbolically, it is.
Yeah.
Symbolically, it is the watch that he is kind of like passing on to Kim Gon, and I don't know how else to say it, but kind of like the jewelry for me is always a connection to another person. And where Kan Yohan willingly gives the connection to Kim Gaon, he's always trying to take the connection, aka Kang Isaac's necklace, away from Suna.
Oh my god, you're right. Oh, you're so right. And of course, whenever he gives it to her in a unbelievably manipulative move that he then regrets because it disappears. Because she just throws it away. Oh my god, I'm gonna have to look at why are you doing this to me? Oh no, you're so right.
And
I'm gonna have to do like a whole ass thing about just following the jewelry now. You're so right. I believe he gives it to her in episode 11 after they have the very gloating dinner. When he
Oh yes.
It's all an extremely layered and masterful manipulation of her, where he like takes her into a room afterwards and it's like, I'm playing you. I am absolutely like eye to eye, I'm manipulating you. This is a manipulation. Here, have the necklace. Like, it could not be more blatant of this is a move. This is not a genuine thing that I am giving you. Here. But it does happen towards the end of episode 11.
I felt he gave it away when he knew that his heart was no longer attached to it.
Ooh. Yeah, because by then... Because, like, giving the watch to Kim in, like, episode 4, like, that early, was when Yoan still... It was almost like a 50-50 shot, really, as to who he was looking at any given point in time. As to whether it was, like, Isaac or Kim, as to, like, who he was seeing. Whereas by then, Kim has arrived as much more of an actual... his own person in Yoan's eyes. So no, I agree.
And he, in episode 4, for me, if you take the jewelry as that, then you can kind of see the moment he decides to entrust the connection to Kim Gaon as he's weighing whether he should give the watch or not.
Oh no, I have to rewatch the closet scene again. That's terrible. That's
The
so
horror.
awful. Eh, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now that I have gone on forever about the jewelry, the other one you kind of already mentioned is the white jacket.
Yeah.
And for me, that was great because it's interesting. As I was kind of skimming through the episodes to, you know, take the screenshots, I realized Kan Han at work is almost always seen in black and white, specifically white t-shirt or shirt and then a black jacket. And it's whatever, it's formal wear. You kind of let it go. But then you look at all the other emphasis put on clothing. They could have gotten a lot more creative with his clothing if it didn't actually mean something already. Which, if you look at Kim Jong-un's white jacket, you can then infer if he has the white jacket of purity as protection that Kan Yohan kind of dawns on him, then it might stand to reason that the black jacket is the mask that Kan Yohan puts on.
Mm.
So I was pretty much like, oh, this is literally, in my opinion, Kan Yohan like giving him armor and being like, here's your armor, because we're about to go into a hellstorm.
Oof, oof. That's what a beautiful way to segue into that dinner tableau. That
Hmm.
it's so visceral, and it's
Very.
another thing where as a first viewer you're watching it and you're like, because Johan is standing amongst them and laughing amongst them, like very pronouncedly like part of the group, and you're
Hmm.
not entirely sure how this is supposed to be taken in terms of Johan's role. All you know is that the like the all the epic like slow fades and everything just makes
Hmm.
you feel sick. It made me feel sick.
Yes.
How did you? Because the way they get into it is really well done as well. It's just all of a sudden they sort of, after this conversation with just some sickening things, and Johan having to shut Kim up in a way that looks like, to a first time viewer, like, know your place, you're blowing my connections with these people, shut up, keep your ideals to
Mm.
yourself. Whereas in hindsight, it's like, I'm trying to take these people down and you can't really talk to them that way right now. Um, and then it just, it's like all of a sudden you're in just this slow motion cross-fading rich people of
Mm.
awful. And the only word that comes to mind for that sequence for me is just sickening. It's nauseating. It's so grotesque. And yet all they do are crossfades in slow motion. And I'm like, how did you do? That's me.
It's
How did
the
that hit
it's the
you?
music
Yeah.
though.
How did that hit
It's
you?
the um that bit I really didn't like.
Mm.
It it was very like auditorily stimulating in the worst way possible.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, that part kind of like I was just like, par for the course. It was the things once they actually like stopped with the music and the opulence, the touching of the poor waitress. Like, come on, they knew,
Yeah.
and it didn't even phase them. They were like eating, they were fine. That bit for me was worse. But what's interesting here, and I do want to go a little bit back because the lead up to the like actual dinner scene, there's a lot that I want to discuss.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's interesting to me because I mean, you are the master of lighting, you know this probably quite well. But you know, like the function of green in the Matrix?
Yeah. There's so much green in the
I felt
Matrix.
like, just for anyone who's not aware, kind of is supposed to clue the viewer into this is unsettling, something's wrong here, it's not quite natural. Um, and I felt like yellow in the show functioned in much the same way. So, like in that scene, yellow was particularly pronounced. It was saturating everything and everyone in the general vicinity, and you see yellow every single time the president comes onto screen.
Ooh. Yeah, there's even that moment later on in a future episode with this whole like yellow jacket thing. And Yohan even literally says on his way out, he's like, "Oh, you look good in yellow." Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely hard agree. I've been uh, all of my, well, not all obviously, but a lot of my energy initially has been, you know, directed at the Yohan and Kim and Elia and the house and that whole side of things. Um
Because they
Mostly
deserve it.
because the president is so viscerally designed around Donald that like it's only been until recently that I've been able to just stomach his footage and really like kind of start taking a look at it. But
Oh,
just off, even
he
then, just off the top of my head, you're dead ass right about yellow. And my guess
and
would be because
it's
it's the closest they can get to gold.
yeah, and there's something I brought up the yellow as well because there's a thing that I have that I want to mention later on with regards to the Korean flag, but we
Ooh.
shall wait
Hmm.
with that.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to obviously the end of this episode,
Mm,
which you can talk about for an hour alone. Two things, both female villain related. One,
mm,
we get the extremely satisfying scene of Suna dominating the fuck out of the sleazy chairman guy.
mm-hmm.
And with my brain thinking, I'm like, is she gonna be like a character we root for? Because they're kind of girl bossing her now, like fully. You
Mm.
get the sense you're like, one, kind of something wrong with her, but then also it's like, oh,
Yeah.
she's clearly the woman behind the man in
Mm.
this situation. Like, and now she's just putting a fucking disgusting, you know, molesting rapist literally down on his knees. And I am
Mm-hmm.
terribly here for this. Um,
I thought you might be.
Yeah, even in light of everything that happens afterward, my brain, still
Mm.
when looking at the very complicated portrait that is this amazing character, I'm like, yeah, but that was kind of fabulous though. Like she has so many fucked up things, but this one aspect of her is kind of amazing, which then pays off
Mm.
later when she doesn't to the president. We'll absolutely get there. But for like this one
Mm.
to comes out of the woodwork and does this, I was like, am I about to stand this woman? And of course the answer is very viscerally no. But we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet. And I have a similar to hop to another astounding female villain moment. Cha in this
Mhm.
episode fucking throws her son under the bus for her own
Yeah.
career and lets her
Yeah.
son be flogged. And what's amazing about that is that she does it stone cold bitch, but it still affects her obviously in things that
Mm.
we see both in this episode and I think in the next episode as well. And there are like three levels to it. One, stone cold bitch. Nothing is more important to this woman than her career, not even her own child. But that doesn't mean that she likes seeing her child in pain, even though she's ashamed. Hang on. Oh no, no, yeah, okay. But that doesn't mean that she likes seeing her child in pain, even a child she's ashamed of. But then at the same time, she's going to use whatever genuine pain she's feeling as part of a PR thing to go after Yoan. And once again, like, I'm every now and then, because obviously this is a fucking amazing villain, and that she is so vile and she is so like gone, but she's so interesting, and she's such a fucking boss ass bitch that there are little moments even throughout the series where I'm just like, and that's on feminine power. Like the cigar moment in whatever episode that happens in.
Yes.
When she's sitting back with in the moment, it may even be in episode 4, it might be in episode 5, where she has one of the most amazing, when she's trying to visit her son after he's flogged, and the guy doesn't want to let her in, and she pulls off one of the best I outrank you moments that I have like ever seen. Cause she doesn't even just say it. She's literally like, who's above you? Okay, who's above that? Who's above that? She goes all the way to the top where she's like, I'm above him. Let me in. I'm like, yes, ma'am. It's amazing what they do with the female villains in this show. It's incredible how well drawn they are, how 3-4 dimensional they are, and how detestable yet kind of badass. Yet you also, I mean, you definitely come to understand Suna. We're given a whole lot of information about her by the end of the series. But you still get a pretty decent portrait of Cha as well. And like, I am in awe. I am in awe. And the fact that like those two moments, such choice moments of Cha throwing her son under the bus, and then also Suna just dominating the shit out of an asshole. It's just so beautiful. I was so glad that we get a little bit of a team up with them for about like an episode or so. An episode and a half. I was really happy for that. My soul wanted that. As much as I hate them, kind of love them sometimes, but absolutely loathe them. They're complicated. They're very complicated.
Yeah, no, definitely.
What? But also at the same time, it did come out of left field a little bit. So I would love to know what the hell was going through your mind when all of a sudden Suna is literally like doming this fucking like molester asshole.
I saw it coming.
Yeah.
A little
bit.
So I think the only thing that I like viscerally remember is my discomfort with the realization that she was the kind of person who could drive other people to hurt themselves. Because they were more scared of the pain that she would inflict on them than the pain that they could inflict on themselves.
Yeah.
So, because just the way he hits his head hard. I thought I was gonna see blood, you know.
I could have sworn we did.
It was very red, but I didn't.
Yeah?
I don't think we ever actually saw bleeding.
Okay.
And it was like, that was intense. I genuinely thought he was gonna crack his head open.
Yeah.
And that was gonna be the end of him. And I wouldn't have been even like, I would have been surprised, but also not really.
Yeah.
Because she just has that aura about her that tells you she'd probably drive you insane if she wanted to. So yeah, I think that for me was the pinnacle of that moment, and it just freaked me out.
No, it's terrifying. Watching her, like, because, you know, you got the sense of one behind the man. You get the sense that she's the one to kind of cut him off at the pass when it comes to how he wants to treat women. And, like, we kind of get that sense. But I don't think, not in Western media, surely, a flip like that, for me, was so... It made so much sense, yet on the other hand, was such a leap to a place that I was not expecting exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's something that, again, I wouldn't have really expected from Western media to play out exactly like that. It's a genius decision that felt so specifically like South Korean to me. It's like, I'm watching a really, really good show from South Korea, aren't I? When they pull something like that.
Because let's be honest, most likely if we saw this in Western media, the woman would have the control over the man, but it would be because she was most likely in bed with him and making him think that
a more
like
Lady Macbethian
her
type.
ideas was it wouldn't have just been no. There's not even a hint of that. You do not touch me, I'm disgusted by you, but I'm gonna make you beg. It's completely different, and it's not a dynamic that you normally would see portrayed in Western media, because frankly I don't think they're comfortable with it.
Right? Exactly, yes. And we don't even get the hint, I don't think, in that scene, although I mean, like, a lot happens in a very short time in that scene. But I don't think we get the hint that he had done something to her yet. I think we might get that later, but even so, you're still like, it feels like it felt like it. That was my first initial gut guess. I was like, she didn't say that he had laid a hand on her, but that type of punishment against that guy that was so intense and felt so personal and so disgusted that, like, my first thought was he had to have done something to her, and she has now, like, somehow flipped the tables on the dynamic.
Yeah. I think I wasn't 100%, but there was one thing that she said that, and the way she reacted to it, that made me think it seems like she's talking from personal experience. And it was, does the owner get dirty if a dog bites them?
Yes!
She seemed personally offended by the idea.
Yeah. Where, like, it was a very, like, a deep implication in that, like, it wasn't terribly on the nose, but at the same time, it was probably that moment where it was like, she didn't directly say it, but she seems so, once again, like, personally offended by it that yeah, that's the moment. That's exactly it. Oh yeah, Jesus. As much as I love that scene, though, it is so hard to watch.
Yeah,
I'm like, it is both, you both love to see it, but you also kind of hate to see it.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in hindsight, on repeated viewings, when you know Suna, you're like,
yeah, it just makes it worse somehow. Because then you
like,
don't have the...
You're like, can no longer be the girl boss moment the purely girl boss moment that you were hoping for, because we know now. So speaking of knowing now, so the fire, and specifically among the fire, I feel like we could have somewhat guessed at the way things unfolded, the particular amount of, everybody climbing all over each other and sabotaging each other in, like, a desperate bid for survival, especially, like, these people. It's like, we could have guessed. We did not know that, all of the major players were a part of that fire, so, like, that was brand new information. But then it's like, we can kind of guess mostly how it played out. I feel like the biggest information drop in the whole fire sequence is Cha being the one to break Ellie's legs.
Yeah.
which I just not to be ironic because this is a Clue reference, but like flames on the side of my face, man. Every single time the depravity of that woman astounds me in so many ways. And once again, that type of moment, I feel like you don't see in Western media as well.
Yeah.
Like, that really, like, went there. And we had never, and one of the things about that kind of reveal that I love is that up until then, we hadn't really been questioning why Ellie is in a wheelchair. She's just there. At least it hadn't occurred to me to make any kind of guess, and then have it being such a meaningful and like plot point, like such a big thing. I love stuff like that where they take things that you haven't even thought of and they're like, actually, this is a fundamental part of more than one character and the overall plot. I love shit like that. Explain, because I had no fucking words for when I first saw that, and I could barely look at it. Obviously, like, children in pain. And then they had to go and get the cutest little girl.
She's so cute, and they did so well with the children casting.
Yeah. That, like, I could barely even look at that scene, so I've got to know how you experienced that moment in particular.
I think I was just kind of like stunned. I had, I think, assumed that, you know, maybe a roof beam or something had fallen on her, and that's how she, you know, ended up in a wheelchair. But I was very disgusted, and then I kind of became frantic almost when she just keeps going. Like, it's one thing to accidentally like have the thing fall on her, but she just stays there and she just like keeps on pushing more and more weight onto it, and this child is crying and she just doesn't care.
And she deliberately
like,
climbs
it's not even...
over. Yeah. Which actually, now that you've said it, that parallels kind of beautifully with Johan's whole point later in the beginning of episode 8 when he explains to Kim, he's like, it wasn't even necessarily their behavior at the fire that was what did it for Johan, because desperate people, right, who are running for their lives, it wasn't even necessarily that. It was the morning after when they deliberately went to the hospital and played that fucking game on him. And that strikes me as to be very parallel, because it's not so much that she was like thrown back onto the pew that crushed the girl's legs. It's not so much that, because you can, you know, chalk that up. Even her slowness and kind of looking around, you can chalk that up to like the trauma of the moment. It was seeing that she was crushing this little girl and then making the conscious choice to continue crushing her so that she could climb out. That is what does it.
Yeah.
And I love that that's like a little microcosm off of the thing that really tears Johan, that really put Johan ultimately into action.
But also the fact that like Isaac literally just stayed alive long enough to get Johan to pull Elia out from under him so she also wouldn't be crushed. Things like that just make me like a character instantly and then immediately mourn them so hard. It's really unnecessary.
Literally the inversion of what Cha does to her.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, can we like, crap, I always want to forget his name. I think his name is Jin Young. Can we just, like, I'm so mad that so many of these people didn't get awards, but, like, I am stunned that a K-pop idol can act to the degree that this motherfucker acts. Like,
And I think it was his drama debut, if I'm not mistaken. I think he done like one movie before.
yeah. I'm furious.
Okay, there's a lot. There's a lot. Hold on. We need to slow down. Ironically, I still need to go back to before the party scene because there's two moments that I need to address.
Yes,
but
sure.
just last thing about the fire. It was so infuriating the way that no one helped Kan Johan when he got out of the church.
Oh,
Like no one
yeah.
looked at the little girl
That
and
was
his
one of those things. Yeah, that was one of those things where they're waking up alone in this doused church, and I'm like, there's not at least a couple of rescue workers trying to pull people out to make sure that for survivors. And then, like, he's walking out and he's standing there, and obviously I understand, like, the drama of the moment of looking around at, like, all these people. He is now standing there, like, carrying with Elia. It is I mean, they were obviously already, like, bonded and close and hello uncle nephew before, but, like, that was the solidifying moment of them. And I understand all the drama, but there's always the little voice behind my head that's like, her legs are crushed, there's an ambulance, like, right there. Why are we not and why isn't anybody, one of the EMTs, like, focusing on him? I know that exact, yeah, I get that same feeling too.
It's so frustrating because like it's the anger for the characters, then it's the like moments where my brain is, but this doesn't feel realistic, and then I realize maybe it is. Maybe because the people in power are fine. They didn't care to look further.
It could also be, yeah, it could also be the people in power who were ultimately fine were soaking up all of the attention and resources from the people who actually
The people in need.
help. I hadn't thought of that. That is a good ass point. And considering the way that this show loves to make points like that in particularly poetic ways, that sounds pretty legit to me. That's something that they could have very well done on purpose.
The fact that Johan decided that, yeah, he was taking Kim Gaon to a very pretentious party, but he decided to go with a non-pretentious car. I'd like to think there's some symbolism in that.
Yeah, no, the whole symbolism of it's one of the ways in which we are being shown, like, the real Yoan, as opposed to the guy in the matte gray sports car at the very opening shot, and the guy in that same sports car who, tracks down Youngmin and beats the hell out of his car. Yeah. No, I love that little, like, no, we're gonna go now. Obviously, that SUV or whatever is still, like, slick as hell. It's still gorgeous, duh. But it's just the overall impression and the difference between, like, supercar and SUV. No, yeah, I literally have that written down, and I had forgotten to say it. Yes, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
One small thing was the, like, when they're entering the party, the hand on the back and the like
the hand on
why
the back,
are you rescuing
grab to get him out of the hole?
Yeah. The why are you protecting me? I can protect myself. You look like a baby fawn. What are you talking about?
Like, what do you mean? You are being preyed upon by those women. I am just the one who saved you with a wrist grab. Oh,
and a Bambi reference.
Yes,
gotta give the Bambi reference.
No, it's so
Oh, it was so good.
The chairman give his speech essentially about being, kind, generous to the poor, keeping them in mind, all very foundation-y, speak when he's giving that speech. and Yeon and Kim are up in the dinner area, looking down and watching it. Just the smallest thing, but they're sitting there and they're watching, you know, and they're clapping along, but then Yeon, like, turns and leaves, kind of like in a I've had enough of watching this sort of way. And on first watch, when you don't know how hypocritical the Foundation is, and et cetera, and all about that guy and just everything, it looks like he's like, altruism, and like, don't want to hear about that, I'm gonna go. But in hindsight, it's very much like, I can't stomach this hypocrisy, I'm gonna go over here. I'll just be over here. You can watch, because this is just the setup so that, you know, you can see the depth of the hypocrisy later, but I don't have to watch this. I'll be over here. And it's in little moments like that the repeated viewing of the show is just bonkers. So the very, very last moment of this episode,
which I had not known existed.
Yeah, which is real easy to miss.
I didn't catch it on my first watch.
So easy to miss. But so deeply important, but not just the reveal of the literal cross that is on Yoan's back that he bears every day. It's, you know, specifically what he says to himself after Kim leaves, which is the whole like, yeah, people usually like stories like that. And the way he says it, I'll admit, I initially misinterpreted it a little bit. I thought that they were going, I still got the sense that, you know, he may have brushed it off or said something like that, but I still got the sense of, like, he's clearly weaponizing his trauma, in that what he said had to have been at least mostly true, but he was using it as a way to get further in with Kim. But I did think, however, that it would be a little bit more of a how did I get these scars situation. And that I thought there was going to be a lot more things about that version of events that was unreliable. That maybe he emphasized like his own victimhood for the sake of who he was talking to and why, and that we would later go on and find out other things, which is flatly incorrect. Even though you're still kind of like doubting as as you keep watching the series, you still want to, did Yoan kill his brother? And it's like, the guy who you see in that fire would absolutely not. It's like, but then how much is he like? But instead, it's just, this show does such a crazy ass job of being like, we are literally showing you who Yoan is over and over again. But at the same time, for various reasons, you will doubt your own eyes until, like, the very end.
Yeah.
So what, since I misinterpreted it somewhat, once again, how did you receive this? It's a little bit of a mind-blowing moment to me. So how did you interpret it?
I didn't. Because I only saw that after credit scene when I was watching your reaction to it.
Oh
After
my God,
I'd already
you're
watched
kidding.
most of the I never saw that, and I was looking at it and I'm like, that's so interesting, because I took what he said at face value then when I was watching the episode. Didn't see that bit, and then when I watched it via your reaction, I was like, this is so interesting, because I know that probably if I'd seen this when I was supposed to see it, I would be thinking more or less just that he, had fabricated most of it with maybe like 2 or 3 grains of truth. And he told the best story that he could to get the best results from Kim Go-eun. Watching it in the headspace that I was in while I was watching the reactions, it was much more just, it seemed to me like he was basically saying, so this is what's necessary for people to even give me a chance. Like this is the kind of pain that I have to bear to, you know, everyone to see, just in order to be given the benefit of the doubt. So that was very much it, and it's kind of amplified because I'm not sure in which episode it is, but at some point, and I think I even like made notes of the episode once we get there. I'm not sure, but at some point, he and Kim Gon are like having a conversation over dinner. Says something like, you know, I don't usually mind people saying that, but when you say that to me with that face, it hurts. And then you know, Kim Gon's like, I'm sorry, and then in his mind, Kanyeon's like, he falters when I say it like that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I thought it's just him once again, like saying what he means, but seeing how it will affect Kim Gon.
Yeah. And then even Kim later on in that very scene, he says something particularly like very true, but very cutting to Yoan, and says out loud what Yoan thought. So like when Yoan said something and watched Kim flinch a little bit, in his head he was like, he flinches when I say stuff like when I say stuff like that. And then when Kim says something to Yoan that gets that kind of similar particular reaction, he says out loud, he's like, oh, you flinch when I say things like that. And I'm like, what kind of brain wave are you guys on? Even
Yeah,
is that?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. That was one of the best moments where I felt like, wow, okay, he's really starting to learn to read Kan Johan, and I wish we'd had more of that. But then the moments of doubt that Kim Gon does have in Kan Johan after that would not feel as realistic as it does.
Yeah.
Like if he genuinely understood him to a level where he could predict his thoughts on a regular basis.
Yeah. Exactly.
Your visual cinematic shots.
Yes, so there were a
Let me just
couple
quickly.
of I mean, there are a couple of really obvious choices, like the iconic shot during the fire of everybody struggling in the middle aisle, and it's like the profile, and obviously, and then, you know, obviously there's the amazing shot of, you know, Yoan with Elia like in his arms, and it's as he's looking out over everyone and the camera's behind him, and it's very silhouette.
Yes.
Like obviously these are incredible shots. But I wanted to highlight something that happens very quickly. I think the shot itself is only like 3 or 4 seconds. But it is during the fire. Let me click over to it. Yeah.
Spoken like someone who has watched this show many times.
Possibly. I don't know what you mean. So this shot, it's a tracking shot, and it very quickly follows Yoan as he's scrambling from the floor over to Isaac and Elia, who are under.
Oh,
who have been
yes.
hidden under, and it's this amazing shot that goes through the pews, as you can see, with the way. But there's something about the way they decided to cover how Yoan scrambles over to them. They put the camera down on the ground, right at level with Yoan, and they put him right in the middle of everything. So that you have all the fire behind him, but you also have the pews like in the foreground of the lens. So between the camera and Yoan are the pews.
Yeah.
So it just so tightly and claustrophobically puts Yoan at the center of all this chaos, and then you have the camera so quickly moving to the right, to the audience's right, as he scrambles over. And even though it's a very brief shot, it's I mean, film composition, it's composed so well, and it's just so gut-wrenching in the way that it captures how he's literally desperately crawling to get to them.
Yeah.
And it's such a nice, I say nice, it's terrible. It's terrifying, it's awful, it makes you feel all the things. But it happens so quickly that it's a really good example of how they put so much thought even into the more fleeting moments during this whole sequence. And so I wanted to like shout that out rather than do any one of the other like more iconic, obvious ones. I have a little soft spot in my heart for this one.
Yeah, and I like because I distinctly remember that moment where he's almost like a frantic animal
Yeah.
crawling towards his family. Yeah.
Is so desperate and so
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Is that it for episode 4?
I think so.
Yeah?
We did amazing. Only 1 hour.
Right? Only 1 hour. Episode 5 literally starts with Yohan's nightmare. And
Yeah.
and having that dream, you know, about Isaac with the fire in his room, and then Kim comes in and really just ends my whole life, and all of those things. But it was even like that fast. Like between 4 and 5, I had the impression of, you know, it was going to be like the Joker's how to like get these scars thing, and we're just going to kind of cycle through all these different interpretations of the fire until we finally get to the real truthful one at the end. That's how I was thinking.
Yeah.
And then episode 5 starts, and I was like, maybe not. Maybe maybe he was telling the truth more than his glibness would suggest. 'Cause that whole sequence, and the fact that he doesn't sleep on his back in that way, also painful.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
We only see him with his back, just, I mean, like, he sits regularly, obviously, but we see him sitting up in bed after he's like shot and like put in bed like later on. So we see him sitting with his back up against things like that. But the 2 times I think we see him sleeping, he is very deliberately not on his back, which feeds into my theory that any pain he experiences in his back is purely psychosomatic. It's entirely in his head.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that is very old scar tissue. It hurting in the way that it seems to hurt him at choice moments doesn't strike me as something that's actually happening to him. And so I think he could, if he wanted to, he could sleep on his back, but for very deeply traumatic reasons, he doesn't.
I didn't even think of it as weird.
Yay! Oh, I'm telling you something. This is wonderful. Yeah, I forget exactly what the second time is when we see him sleeping. I think it might be in the back half of the episodes, but yeah, there are a couple of times where we specifically see him sleeping, and he is very deliberately like not entirely on his stomach, not entirely on his side. He's kind of somewhere in the middle, but he is absolutely not sleeping on his back. Nope.
Before we move on from that scene, now I don't know if this more technically would fall under your like cinematography things, but I did want to mention that moment where he is kind of like reaching out on the bed towards his brother. Did it not very much give you like Adam reaching towards God vibes?
That's actually, yeah, that has occurred to me with the way, because it's obviously like mirrored in the same way that he reaches towards Kim at the end of episode 1, and which in his mind he is reaching towards Isaac anyway. Yeah, it's like the way he reaches out. That image occurred to me more than once, and I was like, but I could never really decide. I was like, is that a thing that they were deliberately going for, or am I just equating one guy reaching out towards one with that thing, because that's literally what it is. So I feel very validated that seemed to occur to you as well, because it totally did. Yeah, I saw that.
Yay, it's not just me, I'm so glad.
Right? No, yeah, I know. It's not just me. I'm so glad. Yeah.
Yes, okay, so this is the moment that we just referenced where it's like he wavers when I said that. It's in this
Yeah, yeah, it
episode.
is. Yeah, they have their whole monster victim conversation. It's like, so you're saying it's better to be a monster than a victim? And that directly
Hmm.
prompts Johan to recall those memories of his dad um, abusing him and him in his mind stopping his dad, right? And that whole unbelievably painful moment that makes you want to
The
cry every single time. Yeah, that.
yeah,
Um,
because that I had that down because the way something inside me broke when the actor said, "Don't hit me."
yeah. Did he even say me, or
Like,
was it
please,
like don't hit him?
he he's. I think I took a screenshot. Give me a second.
Oh, it
Don't
is
hit
me.
me.
Maybe it's different in mine.
May
Maybe my
because
subtitles were different.
no, but it is weird because I checked or not checked. I distinctly remember it being "Don't hit him," but
Mm.
then these subtitles say "Don't hit me." So
Mm.
someone who can speak Korean, let us know, because
Right, yeah, exactly
um
which. And that
no,
that was the first
Jin.
real indication where me being a writer nerd, when he says at the end of that scene, he's standing and he's looking around, he's like, I'm so tired of this house. Um that's when I was like, oh, okay, so then maybe we're not supposed to end the series in this house.
Mm,
Which there were like, even by episode 5, there are tons of reasons to be like, wow, this house is kind of big, looming, depressing, half unused, and not generally
mm,
a happy place. But at the same time, from a show perspective, it's essentially kind of the set.
yeah, it's
You
amazing.
know, like it's one of the core focal locations of the show for upteen different reasons, right? And so in that sense, it was like you're kind of expecting that just to be the stalwart, like the constant. And then when he said that, I was like, oh, maybe
Mm.
this is one of those shows where we leave that behind, where we're supposed to leave this house. um I can't remember if I actually said that out loud during the reaction, because I was too busy being emotionally
Mm.
compromised by everything that had just happened, um as I fell absurdly in love with the character of Yon. So I'm not sure that I vocalized it, but that just goes down on the long, sad list of things that I think at the moment, and then I don't say, and then I'm right, and then nobody has any
Yeah.
reason to believe me.
This is why we as reactors talk too much, is because we want to make sure that if we somehow manage to get one thing right out of the many things that we get wrong,
Yeah.
that people
If
know
we
it.
don't say it, it didn't happen in our heads. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I cannot be honest. The moment he said, "I'm so sick of this house," I genuinely thought that by the end of the show, the house was gonna explode. Like, no jokes. I genuinely thought there was gonna be like a showdown in the house and the house would basically be
There is
ruined.
definitely a version
Um,
of this show that ends with the house going up in flames specifically.
yeah.
Yeah, there's absolutely some kind
So
of ending of the show of that. Yeah. Um.
so I was surprised that they just peacefully left the house by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. And yet, at the same time, not to get too much into the finale, it's like, but yet in the same time, that was like, with the way that everything else went about the ending, it made like it was such a cathartic, like, relief of these
Mm.
people can finally just go. They're not being traumatically
Yeah,
pushed. It's not no longer an option. It's just, we're done. We can
there.
leave now.
Yeah.
And then they just leave. Because these people never get
Mm.
anything fucking easy. So then the fact that they were able to just go and just leave all this
Yeah.
baggage symbolizing the house behind was so nice. However, there is definitely a
Yeah.
version in
The
which it goes up in flames.
But yeah, as you said, like the fact that they had the choice. It was a choice they made. It wasn't something that Kan Johan was just once again forced into because of bad
Mm-hmm.
circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, he's like,
definitely.
my plan is over. We can finally fucking get out of this house. Like, the only reason we're still here is because I needed this house as part of the very grand scheme. Scheme's done. We're out. Bye. And I love that
Oh,
for them.
yeah.
This is also the episode with the connection in which um, I have a growing theory that this one conversation between Kim and Yoan is the one where Yoan's plan for Kim started to take a stumble into the personal.
Okay, let me
And
hear it.
it's the conversation where Kim connects to Johan through anger, and where Kim is like, no, 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 no. When it comes to anger, I fucking understand you. I get it. I get the anger. And when Kay enters after Kim leaves, Yoan directly admits to Kay, he was like, that threw me. I've never
Mm.
actually felt like connected to someone in that way, and on common ground with someone in that way. And he admits to having been thrown by that. And that, which I'm still looking into because I just stumbled across this last night, seems to be the first moment where everything that he does with Kim beforehand could be chalked up to this is his grand scheme for trying to recruit Kim onto his team. It's the
Mm.
classic, it's almost like the classic like bet plot of initially being
Mm.
like, yeah, I bet
Yeah.
you that I can take her and blah blah blah, and then like you fall in love with the person along the way. That whole plot line. There's always
Yeah.
like that little turning point where it goes from something planned to all of a sudden something a little bit more emotional, and I think it's that conversation. And considering what he says to Kay afterwards, because Kay's like, why are you doing this? And Yohan is like, he caught me off guard. I don't know. And I was like, but why are you doing what though? The dialogue around that was a little vague, so I'm over here like replaying these same like 45 seconds of Kim saying that and then leaving, and then what Yohan says to Kay. And so far, my prevailing theory is that like maybe Yohan was supposed to let Kim go home, let Kim move out, and
I
then
mean,
they connected in anger, and he was like, "No, you can stay."
it could either be that or it could be why are you allowing yourself to get emotional?
Yeah, yeah, mm-hmm. Because like when Kay first asked Yohan about his behavior in relation to Kim, it was more of the implication was more of like, "Are you doing this because the guy looks like your brother?" Because it was like after the
Mm.
fire moment, I think in episode 3, when
Yeah.
Yohan like practically burns that guy. Um, but in this,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, in this it is a little bit more of an implication of like, why is he like literally under your roof and still here? Like, why?
Mm.
And yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense too.
But
Hmm.
it's also interesting because one of my clothing theories kind of like fits in with what you just said, which is weird. Um, thinking of that, like that one moment of connection with them, do you think that that was the moment where Kan Johan started being greedy for someone to understand him?
Actually, yes. Especially since he initially says, I didn't ask you to understand me. The whole point is whether or not you're going to team up with me on this, which, sets up the fundamental question that we're asking for the next 4 episodes from a really nerdy writer
Mm.
standpoint. Um, But yeah, he directly says, I never asked you to understand me, which is your like number one clue that wow. So he really did understand you in that moment then. Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is very much it is definitely the starting point for when Yoan starts considering Kim in a different way. Less of a chess piece and more of this person who he's not quite sure how he feels about anymore. And it's exemplified by this is also the episode where Kim leaves Yoan food, something to eat, and you have that whole sequence of he's very like attentively and kind of like curiously eating this food, and therefore the implication is that he's considering Kim this whole time in a way that he hadn't before. And he like makes his little promotional coffee and he like turns around and he's like, that was nice. And you're like, yeah, I'm picking up a metaphor here, Yoan, about what exactly you are considering now in a way that you haven't yet.
It's interesting, not to say that obviously his actions weren't like motivated before. Everything that he has done makes sense without the greed concept added to it. But I mean, why not just add one more layer to it if you can?
You know, exactly. Now it's like, oh,
so...
this guy understands me on an anger level. Maybe like I'm personally drawn to him and not just professionally, for lack of a better word, because we know what that means.
Because like for me, it's interesting because I feel like if you put the like greed for very human understanding that, you know, I feel like it's actually quite natural in most people, then you have that like that reaction making sense. Oh wow, that like that threw me. And then suddenly him being like so motivated to get Kim Gon to see that the system betrayed him, getting Kim Gon to leave everything that he knows and loves behind for him. All of that is then also in pursuit of keeping hold of the only person who he feels truly ever knew him.
Yes, absolutely. From you, you totally get that added layer from then on, from episode 5 on, that it is no longer just about recruiting Kim. It is about this is potentially the guy that could stay after I'm gone. This is potentially a really valuable moment of the team. This is also potentially a person who can understand me in a way that nobody has before. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a little devastated. My shipper heart just grew even larger at this moment. I'm not gonna lie to you right now. Whew. Mental note, have breakdown about this later. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think aside from that, I have, you know, the screenshot from episode 5 that I could highlight, and I know, but you please go first with the things that you wanted to highlight. Yes.
Did you not first want to talk about the ending with Suna? The very, 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 if I'm not mistaken, it's in this episode, is it not?
Which ending with Suna?
The warehouse and the kidnapping.
Oh my freaking god, how do I not have that written down? I'm over here like, what ending do you mean with Suna? Something happened at the end with Suna? How do I not have that written down? This is peak ADD moment. I have so many little details like written down, and then it's like, BT dubs, Suna was window girl. Forest for the Trees is the subtitle to ADD. Yeah.
Yes.
No, yes, please, for the love of God, tell me how that hit you.
Okay, so let me do the the clothing bits because it
Yes.
kind of factors into things a little bit. But okay, so firstly, there is the one that is Kan Yo-han sitting at the table eating the food that Kim Go-eun has prepared for him. But my focus is on the vest
Yeah.
that with the jacket on, you see only the black. With the jacket off, you see the blue. And if we know my color theories by now, blue represents Kim Go-eun. And I was like, this to me, he wears this vest all of 2 times. And this is the first time. The other time is at a point where I don't think I've made a note of it yet, but where I also felt like it kind of signified Kim Go-eun, kind of like what was his guardian angel in that moment, like mentally speaking, because I think he made a decision that, like, if you know the character, you know he wouldn't have made that decision before he'd met Kim Go-eun. But anyway, that's for later. This specifically, I was like, this feels very much like there's this idea of his normally black and white view of how he's approaching things is being influenced by Kim Go-eun, and that thought was then amplified by what you said about that threw me a little bit. So yeah, I don't know, that was something I kind of just picked up as a theme throughout, is Kim Go-eun is slowly but surely making his way into every aspect of Kan Yo-han's life. And yeah, I thought the vest kind of represented that.
No, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. That does piggyback right off of the whole considering it. This show, I'm in physical pain. All right. No, that's a very good point. Okay, so yeah, I have 2 questions about the end of this damn episode. One is just, what the fuck happened to your brain when you realized it? When, if you can remember, was like the actual moment that you realized it, as it was being, like, you know, unveiled or what have you. And I also have a question about what you think about the dress that she wears in that moment from a metaphorical standpoint. I was having like, on one hand I get it, but on the other hand I cannot articulate what I get. It's a very weird feeling. But first, mind being blown, mind leaving your body. I know mine sure as hell just melted out my ears.
I felt like an idiot.
Right?
No, not for the very valid reason that most people would feel like an idiot, unfortunately. No, I didn't click. I was like, am I supposed to get the reference? So I was like, okay, so she worked with him. I'd clean forgotten about the bit that they planted about the maid that I jumped out of the window. Maybe not clean forgotten, but I had assumed that, because going back now, I can't remember if they ever specify that she died. They said she died.
They didn't.
Did they say?
No, yeah, they did not specify.
And that was my thing, is they said she jumped out of a window, so my brain just assumed she had died. And so when they revealed, okay, so she's like connected to him, I didn't even think about the fact that she could be the maid who had jumped out of the window, because it was like, no, they said she's dead. Like I don't think they would have just casually.
We saw her on the ground as she has to. Yeah, my brain wrote her off as dead too. Yeah.
So I didn't click it at all. There wasn't even. I think the clicking only really came in the next episode, like at the beginning of the next episode when they kind of replay it, and I had time to think about it. So unfortunately, my thoughts on that was completely underwhelming. I just more was looking at it from, oh, okay, so they had a past he clearly remembers her but didn't connect the dots. And interesting that this is her choice for a grand reveal. Like that was more where my focus was than, oh, she's the maid. Um,
I
yeah.
think it I mean it obviously like it dropped in as it was happening because they
Mm.
have her enter and you're in a warehouse that's made up to look like Johan's house and you're like, what's happening right now? Because and the genius way that they set up this reveal is that yeah, they let you assume that she died because she
Mm.
jumped out a window. And so you're not even considering
Yeah.
that person could show up in in the present day timeline at all. Because the
Mhm.
show loves to dangle enough for you to make an assumption and be like, "Ha, wrong." Um
Mhm.
and but I think there was a shot of the silver cup with the stirring spoon in it, like one of those.
Yes.
I
Mhm.
think it was when like they showed that. I think it was maybe like a couple few seconds before they actually had that brief flashback
Mm.
showing the girl showing the young version of Suna. I think it may have happened right
Yeah.
before they literally just kind of tell you. Um but
Mm.
I mean, brain wiped. I didn't. That's one of my favorite reveals, kind of in anything ever. And like,
Mm.
because it was set up so flawlessly that like you've been watching this chick the
Mm.
whole time. She's overly familiar with Johan, who wants nothing to do with her.
Mhm.
There's clearly something wrong with this woman, right? Just something's off
Yeah.
and you don't know what. And you figure it's like, I don't know how something's wrong with her, but they'll get to it. They'll tell us. We'll find out. And then it's like, yeah, because she was the maid who jumped out the window. And I just had never. This is also just to me, a purely South Korean moment. Because, like, who the fuck is like, yeah, this girl jumped out the window in one of the main characters like pasts. He had her jump out a window and then have that character show up as a main part of the something about that is so South Korea to me in all the best ways.
Yes.
That is some just pure amazing South Korean plot twist and like character reveal at the same time. I was on
Mhm.
the fucking floor. I'm sure my face on camera in that moment was hilarious. Um, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
and the way you know it's a good moment is because if it had been played in a lesser drama with lesser well-developed characters, it would have felt
It would
cheap.
have felt, yeah, it would have felt cheap. It would have felt so like, I don't know, soapy's kind of the first word that come to mind. Like,
Yes.
but
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Telenovela.
yeah. But with the style of the show and everything that they had already established about this
Mm.
very bombastic, heightened world that is, of course, very,
Mm.
heightened in some ways, but then is just brutally realistic in others. Um, they just set it up so perfectly so that it works in with the show instead of like, um, just blowing the doors off of any attempt at like realism or cohesiveness
Mm.
within a show. It fit right in
Yeah.
because we'd seen
It
the
did.
fire
It
by
did.
then. We'd seen all these other things. It was perfectly set up for, and also here she is, and it just slots right in.
Mm. So before we talk about the clothing, because the clothing didn't mean anything to me on the first viewing,
Right.
especially because the fact that the maid was the maid flew over my head. Um, but before we get into that, let's talk about the kiss because the
Oh.
kiss made me so sick to my stomach. It was like I was watching the like chairman with the waitress all over again. And the fact that she couldn't realize it because of her own self-obsession. Thoughts.
I
I just,
it it was obviously from a narrative and like character standpoint, it was extremely vital and therefore setting up their dynamic from them forward, going forward, because like it so perfectly encapsulates like their dynamic. She's
yeah,
going too far, and he's tolerating it because he has to.
yeah,
He's literally handcuffed to a chair in that moment. He can't go anywhere. He's in a position
yeah,
of vulnerability in that moment. He just kind of has to go with it. But you can see um, in his eyes in certain moments when they're seen going forward, kind of
mm,
the same whenever she crosses that physical line more than he's comfortable with. And that's not difficult because he's not comfortable with
yeah,
her.
yeah,
Even when he instigates it, right, for manipulative reasons, you see a very similar checkout in his eyes
yeah,
where he kind of
yeah.
goes to
A,
another place
a
and
disassociation.
disassociates, and he goes somewhere
Yeah,
else in his head, and he does it so well that it makes you feel so just bad, just
yeah.
disgusted,
I
just mm-hmm,
uh,
mm-hmm.
I want to talk about it at the beginning of episode 6 as well because I feel like the kiss at the end of episode 5 is bad, but the like the fallout from it for me is worse.
Mm.
So I do want to still talk about that as well, but quickly before we end the this episode,
Mm-hmm.
um, so you asked about the dress. So I
Yes.
have kind of like two shots that more or less for me go together. Reason being, so when she enters the warehouse, when we start to get the reveal, she's like shrouded in this blue eerie
Yeah, the
light.
blue nighttime vibes.
Uh,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, but my brain is like they're literally lighting her like they would light a ghost from Kanyohan's past.
We need to set up like a regular online lunch date or something, because at this point, how did I not? How did I? How? Just how? No, dead ass right. You are absolutely 1000% correct, and I feel so silly right now. Uh huh.
So
Uh huh.
with that in mind, I feel like the dress suddenly makes sense.
No, yeah, float. No, yeah, no. You're so right. You're Jeanet. You're so right. Oh my god. It's right there. It's literally right there. I'm fucking furious at my own stupidity, at your genius, and at the show's genius. I'm incandescent with rage. Oh my
Oh, I
god.
love that expression.
No, yeah, you're right. What more do you want from me? You're right. 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 Uh-huh. You're right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so that's my takeaway with the dress. Um,
Yeah. 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 Mhm. My screenshot from this episode is but what were the couple of runners up, because there were some interesting things. There's always interesting things going on with the way that they
hmm
captured this show. Yeah, there's so I mean obviously a good runner up is, the shot during Johan's nightmare. That's the wide shot of, him reaching for Isaac, kind of
Yeah,
obviously, and then literally my shipper heart. I had to reel myself in. I was like, you cannot make. There is nothing cinematically valid or stunning about Johan fucking grabbing Kim by the chin. There is no actual filmmaking reason to highlight that moment. That is purely a fangirl moment. Do better. So I did, but I had to talk myself off of that ledge. Because there's a two shot of
a
them.
wonderful moment.
Yeah. There was one.
Oh,
There was one telling shot of them. I can't remember if it was them or if it was just Kim, or maybe it was just Johan. Of Johan's, office, but it was like from the second floor, and it was behind the railing, so it had a very bar, or like prison bars look to it.
yes.
Which is a common thing to use for several reasons. That was another runner-up, but the one that I went with, which kind of also feeds into another one of my like favorite shipping moments, because it's so quintessential to so many like gothic Victorian romances, right? The moment where Johan is in his room and he gets up and he goes to the window and he looks out at Kim and Elia with the cat in the backyard. And then
the Beauty and the Beast moment.
Yeah, they're in Beauty and the Beast and connect, and the look on Kim's face, like, what the fuck? But okay, since I'm trying to be like professional here, from an actual film composition thing, it is a shot of Johan approaching the window in his very dark room, because it is a very bright white light, sunny day, that's on the other side of the sheer curtains as opposed to the ones that block out the sun. And so in all this darkness, he's approaching, he's going towards the light, for lack of a better phrase, and that light just so happens to be him pulling back the curtain and looking at the only two people who will actually ever matter to him, which is Kim and Elia.
Well said. Well said.
With a particular emphasis in that moment on Kim, actually. Because again, this is, the start of Johan really considering Kim in a more emotional way. And this absolutely is part of that. But just the shot, because there's another moment like this way later on, I think in episode like maybe 15 or 14, or in the last stretch, where Johan wakes up and approaches the window, but it's at night, and it's a very ambiguous moment for him, very like dark moment for him, like literally. And he approaches the window, but it's entirely just dark, which just enhances the symbolism of this moment, which I really greatly appreciated. Also, obviously, this shot in particular is just framed really beautifully, and me and being a whore for subframes, and this one absolutely is, with the actual blackout curtains. And but it's the metaphor of he's like literally walking towards the light, and the light just so happens to be, his daughter and his husband. So so I still managed to get a shipping moment in there somehow.
Well done.
But I made it valid.
Just
I didn't just make it the two shot of Johan grabbing Kim's chin. Although, damn it, poetic cinema. So that's it for episode 5. Are we then going into episode 6? I thought when we were getting like the fuller context of what exactly went behind Johan being like, "Hey, jump out the window," I thought it was going to be a much longer sequence of we're going to keep essentially kind of zooming out and like going backwards until we get, which is what they did. I just thought they were going to do that to a much like bigger degree. So I kind of almost punked myself because the reveals that we got about the context of that situation were fantastic, but it's like when someone tells you, "I have a surprise for you," and then you guess something that's like a lot bigger than what it really is. It's kind of your own fault.
Yeah.
I kind of did it to myself in that moment. So the reveal the first time I watched it kind of had a purely by my own fault an anticlimactic feel. But then on rewatches, I was like, motherfucker, genius and also brutal, and says a lot. We learned so much about Suna just from
Yeah.
that series of flashbacks. Like,
But I originally struggled to understand the difference.
mm,
Like sounds dumb now, in
nah,
retrospect, but I remember being like, but it's the same thing, and they treat it as if, oh, you're right. That's like, I like telling myself the story of the version that was first presented. I'm like, but it's the same version,
mm,
only to realize, no, 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 it's subtly different in the way that the one is Kan Johan making her do it,
mm,
the other one is her choosing to do it.
yeah,
Um, and so that threw me for a loop the first time I watched it, and it was only on rewatch where I realized, oh, this is the visual first clue to Suna's pattern.
mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
So yeah,
and
yeah,
the two big things that I always take away from that sequence is that one, he asked her and then she willingly did it, right? A
hmm
more, for lack of a better term, a more sane person, obviously would have been like, no.
yeah,
No, but just from what leads up to that moment, we kind of understand that there's something wrong with her. There's something a little bit cracked in
mm,
her overall psyche, and I say that as someone who also has a cracked psyche. Um, uh, cause like we see her have this, essentially big embarrassing crush on him. That's like she just can't
mm,
help for several reasons. But then at the same time, one, she steals his mom's necklace and he catches
mm,
her doing that. But then also, she totally lies and throws him under the bus to save her own
yeah,
skin about stealing things. And it's not at all said or implied, but if you're one of the things the show wants us to do and encourages the viewer to do is to like really kind of think beyond just what we're being told or shown.
told. Mm,
And you're like, she just, told the maid, who's like, oh yeah, I saw Johan stealing things. The maid is obviously going to have to tell his father about that. And what's going to
hmm
happen to Johan when that happens?
Yeah, and I mean it's further confirmed because she encourages him to um, go out into a space that she knows will anger his father, and tells him, "I'll protect you," and then proceeds not to protect him. And
Yeah.
it's interesting because I think that's what made it so hard for me to distinguish um, the original, like what we are originally told the window scene is versus what that window scene actually is
Mm-hmm.
because at that point I looked at what was presented to us in the second version where we start to see all the things that she does wrong, that could potentially make Kan Johan test her like that. Um, and I looked at it and thought, oh, I don't know if she actually has feelings for him or if she's just leveraging his loneliness,
Mm.
um, to because he's easy to manipulate.
Hmm.
Um, uh, so that's what kind of like obscured my view of it a bit because even with the kiss that we had at the end of the previous episode, it felt very much like a power play and not necessarily like the emotion was there.
Hmm.
Um, and it's only later that you realize, but it's both because Suna cannot separate one from the other.
Right. Right. Which makes total sense when you basically get it's almost like this whole sequence was when we get kind of one shoe about Suna, and then the other shoe drops about Suna. And
then another
fairly
one
short,
that you didn't see coming also drops.
yeah, where you get really the full picture of, because like they really show you how just Suna operates with the whole maid thing, window thing. She's attached to and Yoan for all these reasons, but at the same time she also hurts him, and that's deeply dysfunctional. And then yet also at the same time, in a way to manipulate her and get revenge on her for being shitty to him, he asked her to jump out the window, and she does it. So like clearly there is something deeply dysfunctional going on with her that we are made aware of in this episode that then later on is actually explained. And so I love that it was like they kept going back with Suna. It's like we first see her at the very beginning of the show and we're like, she's weird, something's wrong with her. And then you really get her MO exposed in this episode, and you're like, oh yeah, these are and then they finally get back to the core reason why after that. So it's like we keep going back until we get to the real origin of why Suna is the way she is. And she in general is one of the most fascinating villain characters that I've come across. She's fantastic, and also just her role as the villain in compare and contrast with Yoan is just it's genius. It's just genius.
I have so many thoughts about her, but that I want to hold off on until later. So I'm just hoping and praying that by the time that we get there, I actually still have these thoughts somewhere in my brain.
Right, because oddly enough, this is not the full extent of Suna as a character, which you would kind of think.
But also, I quickly wanted to talk, as I mentioned, about kind of the fallout of the kiss, because that, I don't know, that kiss deeply affected me, because I feel like this is one of the few shows where it is treated as seriously as the waitress situation is by the creators, but not by the characters themselves, which is so deeply frustrating, because it's, you see, from my perspective, you see Kan Yohan being given the drug to put him to sleep so that he can be taken back to his car, and you see him like dead staring at her, disassociating almost, and you can see him like, this is his only defense that he has left after having something that he didn't even think he had to protect himself from, exposed. And then you have, you had the scene with Elia being very worried about him not coming back throughout that scene. And then he returns, and Kim Gon's like, oh, where were you? And he makes this assault that clearly affected him into something funny that he can kind of just brush off, because he has taught himself his entire life to keep going.
Wait,
what?
Hang on a sec. Wait. I think this is hang on. I think my brain up until now has failed to yet again to make a very obvious. Yeah, when he...
Did I say something wrong?
No, you said something totally right. It was just that my brain's trying to be like, wait, was that the night after that he referenced? So when he lied, he was lying about that. So, okay. Hang on. 1 second. Let me Cause like, if I'm thinking about what I think that I'm not making
Yeah,
any sense.
so
Hang on.
I can quote it for you if you want.
No, because I
Well,
mean,
I don't know.
I'm deeply aware of the moment that you're talking about. It is. I'm so dumb. Maybe I was so overwhelmed by the fact that Johan was getting Kim to back off by like flustering Kim by describing a fake sexual experience, you know, that he had with some woman. I never connected it that he was. I'm extremely dumb, and I'm so dumb. I never connected that dot. That obviously, very obviously, he was just referencing and mischaracterizing the night that he had. He was telling the truth, but not really. He playing it off as I'm a moron. Wow.
It's okay. We had me and the maid situation, and
yes, and now I have me.
So let's not.
The morning after, Suna does all of this to him, and then he was like, "Oh, I was with a rough woman last night. Do you want me to describe it? She kissed me, blah, blah, blah." I am ashamed. Moving on. Oh my god. Oh my god. I just... That's so funny. That's so funny. What else really? This is where we all had that oh no moment when Suna has that legit like meet cute with JoJo and like catches her on the stairs. I was like, oh my god, is this gonna be the sapphic pairing that I don't want to happen, but I kind of want to happen, but I don't want to happen?
Yes.
And that sinking feeling of no, not JoJo, please not JoJo. But I was so dead ass certain that that's gonna be what they did.
No, that was definitely what they wanted us to think. I will not be convinced otherwise.
Oh no, they totally meant it.
They definitely like wanted us to misunderstand it in that moment, because like everything that they do points towards this is going to be the final face-off, which makes the twist that they then throw in feel completely like as if it blindsides you, but then that's what a twist is supposed to do, so you can't really be angry at it.
Yeah. No, yeah, they very deliberately set up JoJo in a certain way for you to be like, oh no, I know where this is going, and then you don't know where it's going actually. And there's also a bunch of stuff about JoJo's turning point later on that we'll obviously talk about when we get there. But I love the way they did it for so many reasons. Her turnaround fits like thematically perfectly, which we'll of course talk about when we get there. But yeah, up until then, I would have put down literal actual money that JoJo was going to be a corruption arc and serve as a foil to the other two. Yeah, I was just so certain. I was like, I know where this is going.
I'm so glad.
I was like, I hate it.
Yeah, I'm so glad they didn't do that.
But I love it and it's genius. And then they averted it in a way that was equally genius for equally genius reasons. Yes. And that's infuriating. This writer's unhinged.
Okay, so two quick things that I just want to mention. Yeah. They're like very inconsequential moments, but they struck me, and I just need someone to fangirl with about them for like 2 seconds.
I am seated.
So before we have like Miss G walking in, discovering the three of them eating, there's the shots that is like such a couple shots. Like, okay, to be fair, they have a lot of couple shots, but there's just they look like such a couple. They have like matching outfits almost, and like terms of coloring, and they're just glancing between each other.
Yeah.
The show just gives so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one that I was so thrilled to see you being as excited about it as I was is Kim Gaon riding a motorcycle.
Oh my god, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, yes. A weakness. Thank you. The show really does give. Just give and give and give. I was so happy about that moment.
Yes.
Love
And,
me,
oh,
love me a
it's
man on a motorcycle. And especially since, and like this is the thing about the show, it's not like we're gonna give you, you know, Kim on a
just fan
motorcycle,
service.
but it's all,
Hmm.
yeah, it's fan service. It's like, but this also, very much connects to, this is just yet another way in which being involved in Johan's sphere is leading him towards all of the natural impulses that he had that had been reined in by the two people who had been closest to him for all that time.
Yeah.
So even when they give you something fucking delightful like that, they're still like, also, this makes sense on a deep character level that you can then discuss and analyze. And I'm like, this show was made for me specifically. Like,
I, and also, like, I really appreciated the fact that we got like I don't want to say a rare character moment for him because he's shown that he can match um Kanyohan quite well in certain situations, but a lot of the times him matching Kanyohan's energy is messed up by his impulsiveness.
mm,
and and here was for me the first instance where you saw that impulsiveness turn into someone who's able to really quickly think on their feet. When he threw the net into the car wheels.
yeah. Oh, that was nice. Yeah.
That was such a good moment.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I had to mention.
No, that is a moment worth mentioning. Yes, absolutely. I've got my moments. Um,
Hmm.
have we hit your moments? I feel like we hit at least like one or two, but any other moments you have, and then I'll give my screenshot and we
um
can go on to episode 7 because we may just sneak in episodes 7 and 8. We may just actually get through everything.
maybe
Maybe,
we shall
maybe.
see.
Uh-huh.
There was like four frames that kind of pair off together. So as I mentioned in with one of the previous episodes, we kind of have this established thing of Kanyohan at work always wears a white shirt. Sometimes he'll change the tie around a little bit, go a bit creative with the coloring. But here's the first instance where we see him in a shirt that at like on the surface looks gray, but is actually white and black small stripes. And it
Hmm.
was interesting to me because this was the first one after Kim Gon has kind of started to settle into his role with Kan Yo-han, and that he kind of like was you were just starting to think, okay, they're on the same page basically,
Mm-hmm.
and then suddenly you have that, and it's followed up with a few moments where you start to doubt Kan Yo-han's motives again.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that shirt was maybe a little bit of a, hint towards making the audience feel uneasy again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
cause you really don't see him in anything other than a white shirt very often, at work specifically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and
Uh,
that makes sense that they would choose like that method of communicating that there, because um at the beginning of episode 5, so it's immediately after Kim gets the whole explanation of the fire, and then Kim essentially initially goes into episode 5, having gotten this explanation that exonerates Yoan and makes total sense and paints Johan in a much more righteous light. And
Yeah.
then for that, whole, opening scene, Johan, for maybe the only time in the whole show, is in pure white. He's wearing pure white in his like casual at home, what have you. And that had to have been a reflection of Kim's impression of him. Because obviously we know that Johan is not a pure white character.
Not at all.
Obviously. No. He is, at best, oddly enough, most accurately reflected in his judge uniform.
Yes.
Mostly white, but just enough black.
And stylish.
Yeah, and of course stylish. But yeah, so they do have a tendency to play with black and white and the level of black and white, and then of course also gray in that way. So that makes total sense to me. Your interpretation of that shirt moment. That makes sense to me.
And then the other one is kind of like a contrast one. So we have Minister Cha with her like mafia boss cigar smoking scene where everyone is ready to serve. And it was such a deeply uncomfortable scene for me because it very much was exactly the same dynamic that we saw with Suna and her like power over Kanyohan in the scene at the start. So it's these scenes that you would typically see males in and be uncomfortable, and they didn't pull punches with how uncomfortable they made you feel, even though it was women. So that to me was interesting, but also the amount of people around her, and then you cut a few minutes later in the same scene to the room being empty, and it's just Suna sitting there in a mostly white dress with just a little bit of her true nature peeking through in the black. And she's completely alone. And that to me is a theme that carries throughout the entire series. I'll mention it a bit later when we get, I think it's in episode 9 where it really becomes apparent in my opinion. But even when she has people working with her, it's only her that she ever really relies on. So it was such an interesting scene to me because it was very much a good visual representation of that. They have a few of them that I also want to point out later on as we go along, but this one was one of the starting points for me in terms of focusing on her character. And obviously, again, the dress was very much more or less overly white, and then the black. And I need you to pay attention to that because it's gonna come back in the next episode.
Oh yeah. Actually, it was really interesting the way that you like characterized whenever she has just small amounts of black in her outfit as like just still having a little bit of her true nature peeking through. Something about phrasing it that way makes those outfits make even more sense to me. Because I was already really enjoying the fact that, with the exception of I think like 2 times, very choice times, she's only is when she's only ever in a pure white. 2 very deliberate times, and the rest there's always a little bit of black somewhere. And like I was already like really being like, damn, costume department, you really but something about phrasing it that way, of that there's always just a little bit there, I don't know, makes it just that much more I don't know, interesting or deliberate or sneaky, something. That's just a great way to put it. And I'm still not over Porcelain Doll from a horror movie, by the way. I have remembered it. I have written it down. It is going somewhere in the retelling for how I describe her. It is happening.
Oh goodness.
I am still not over that either. So, yeah. No, full agree. Hard agree. Absolutely. 10 out of 10. Um,
Yeah, no, I have to say, like, the actress did an amazing job with her. There's another element of her that I want to talk about later on, but I feel like it only really becomes evident in maybe the next
mm-hmm.
episode, or the one after. But I shall mention it when we get to it.
Hmm.
Um,
Um, yeah, my choice of shot for this episode,
mm,
it's not particularly like thrilling. It's not like the flex like that one shot from Johan in like episode 3 or whatever. It's not just like the overt flex. But it does speak to something that they consistently do on this show with levels, and they're very mindful of
mm,
when they're going to have one character in a scene positioned above another one for a few different reasons. They apply it in a couple of different ways. And
mm,
so the screenshot from this episode, which is when Kim is looking down at Johan and Elia as Johan's packing Elia into the SUV to take her home
mm,
after coming and crashing the lunch and pulling her out of there and all of that, just for extremely understandable reasons that Kim does not understand yet.
yeah.
Um, but there's a shot from kind of almost over Kim's shoulder that's looking down at
Mm,
Yon in particular, when Ellie's already in the car. But just in general, Kim's looking down on this moment. And sometimes whenever they play with levels like this, sometimes it's a
mm,
power thing, sometimes it's a heaven and hell symbolism. Um, and then sometimes it's like this, where you have one character looking on one or sometimes two characters' low moment, and you're
yeah, the
witnessing
vulnerable
them in a
moments.
lot of pain. You're witnessing them down in kind of their own
Yeah.
personal hell. Um, and I love that they almost went out of their way to do that here because it makes total sense. They
Mm,
use this particular, interpretation, this intent, multiple times
mm,
throughout. None more just fucking devastating than what is actually also my choice for for episode 7, when
mm.
Kim is having his ultimate breakdown and Johan is standing
Yes.
there
Oh.
the whole time. And it's just in the previous
Mm-hmm.
episode, Kim was watching Johan at a very low moment. And then in the very next episode, it's flipped and it's reversed. And you now have Johan looking down on Kim in a deeply low moment. That's one of my favorite moments of the show.
Oh.
Um, but yeah, so this shot kind of piggybacks on the next one. But I love that they do this, especially since it just then is in amongst all of the heaven and hell and power dynamics, but then there's also this
Mm-hmm.
intention behind it sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, I love that they also went here with it.
And just like side notes, I love how vulnerable Kan Johan's clothing is right there.
Yeah, it's not a power suit at all because he was literally just walking around at home. He's in gray. He's in something
Mm-hmm.
that looks extremely soft. His hair isn't perfectly coiffed and all of that. It is the much more vulnerable Johan. It actually might be one of the few times. Is this like the only time we see basically at home Johan out in the world? I
Yeah.
think so.
And
Ooh.
also it's interesting because it's something that I haven't 100% verified, but I've noticed that he is almost always in a robe when he's home. And obviously, it's just kind of like a beautiful style choice. Thank you very much for the style department for giving us that. But it's also, it's his, chest is slightly open, vulnerable, exposed, willing to appear that way in front of Kim Go-eun, even though he barely knows this man. Um,
Mm-hmm.
And the only times you really see him in something different is when he's guarding his heart for whatever reason. That's the only times he really appears in something other than that. And the times when he does appear in something like a bit more like, okay, you can see he was not just, lounging about at the home with just the robes on. He always compensates for the fact that he looks more formal by doing something very stupid and socially awkward.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh.
So I feel like it's interesting because it's almost like that visual representation of vulnerability is necessary until Kim Jong-un becomes so integrated into the family that he can now show his vulnerability in other ways than just the way he dresses. But anyway, sorry, I get very passionate about very stupid things. Um,
My entire channel is based on that very statement. Yeah, no, agree. Beautiful, amazing. Definitely. Um Episode 7. Well, I mean, because
okay,
episode 6 ends with, if we're gonna be talking about, it ends with one of the hottest things I've ever seen, with Johan doing the whole turnaround, and he's accused of, paying off whatever, and then he turns around and he's actually, I'm coming after you guys. Here's the whole deal, which once again
it was
changes the trajectory of the show, just like the ending of every fucking episode so far. So firmly, it's like, oh, we're over here now.
Mhm.
Another brilliant ending to an episode. So now for episode 7, we find out so much. We do finally get the last piece, well, sort of the last piece to the puzzle that is Suna. But also, like, Kim opens up to Elia about what happened to his parents, and Yoan is now, at the behest and intervention of Kim, of course, is now actively trying to communicate with Elia in a healthy and productive way.
Yes.
And so it's like, this is episodes 5, 6, and 7 are, I believe, the longest stretch where it's those, right? No. It's later on. It's 9, 10, 11. But 5, 6, and 7 have some real, you get to like watch this family like develop and like start really coming together. And now we've gotten to the point where at Kim's intervention, Johan starts trying to actually be better towards Elia in the most adorable ways possible.
It was so endearing.
He's trying so hard. And Elia just has the understandable reaction of, what the fuck is happening right now? What are you doing? Stop. Like, yeah. And then also, by the end of the episode is when we have like Suna's ascension to full ass power. And oh yeah, we get the Shuyun's knife catch, because we understand that, because we get that dream from Kim about when he was going to kill,
tried to murder
the guy who scammed his parents, but she stops him and she catches the knife. Which, not just with the knife catch, but with all the other things that we're learning about their relationship in particular, it's a really interesting dynamic to me of people who have become like codependent and enmeshed. Like, and we don't get a glimpse of just how far back it goes until episode 14. So after the fact. But going literally back to when they were toddlers, it was always Kim's in pain, Shuyun makes him feel better.
Yeah.
And that has become such a fundamental part of each of them that, like, Kim is only the most comfortable, crying around her. And
Mm.
he's like, he's basically done that thing that a lot of people with depression and suicidal ideation and suicidal tendencies does, which they put essentially their mental
Mm.
health completely in someone else's hands. So they become entirely dependent
Yeah.
on what that person does and how that person takes care of them. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
then for totally understandable reasons, I mean, obviously, and then also
Mm.
understandable is Shu Yun's role that she adopted at, like, what, they were like 2 in that flashback or something, like 3 in that flashback, um
Mm.
where she has become intimately have an intimate sense of responsibility for his well-being, and to the
Yeah.
point where I'm like, it's in a very rare kind of slight misstep of this show, it's generally played for romance, and
It's
that's not great. On the other
it's
hand, it's not like they paint any relationship as perfect in this show, so that could be a thing.
mm.
But just in general, I'm like, we are kind of painting some tendencies as romantic that probably shouldn't be. Maybe? Thoughts,
it's
please.
it's a yeah, it's interesting to me because number one, were you also like was when you saw her catching the blade, was your first thought also, oh damn, she's gonna die and it's gonna be Gaon who causes it and this is the foreshadowing?
Oh, I knew she was totally dead by the end of this
Yeah,
series.
yeah,
Absolutely, for a variety of reasons. I was like, there's no way
yeah,
she's getting out of this alive. None
yeah.
whatsoever. That it was going to be, um, that it thematically went down the way it did. I don't think I necessarily picked up on that as foreshadowing. I always picked up on that specific knife moment as a context of, like, she is protecting him at the cost of herself. And
That's fair.
that type of dynamic. I was more focused on that, but I do see now that you say that, I do see how you would get there, how you would see that as some foreshadowing. Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, there was so many moments where I was just like, ah, this is foreshadowing for that. My word. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but yeah, for me, it's interesting because I think I might have mentioned it in when we were discussing episode one or like our general thoughts.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I clean forgot that this was supposed to be a reciprocal romance situation because it didn't feel like it. It genuinely there was no romantic chemistry for me. Um, and maybe it's just me being oblivious, but I have rewatched it now, and I still, well, not rewatched it, but yeah,
Yeah.
and I still don't get any sense of romance from um, Kim Gaon's side. It feels very much like a situation to me of um, so you're not trying to make it romantic because that's what she's feeling, and Kim Gaon being too go with the flow to fight against it in any way. He didn't really mind it, so he just let it happen.
The first time I watched it, I didn't pick up on romance at all, except for one tiniest blip kind of towards the beginning, where I was
Yeah.
like, oh, that kind of seemed a little bit romantic from Kim's side. But then the rest, it struck me as very much deeply unrequited, but friendship, enmeshed friendship situation where everything I said before
Mm,
still applies, but it was very like friendship situation. Totally
yeah.
got that, to the point where even when, the romance happens and Kim explains it as to, like, he was afraid he would have, it was the explanation of, I would rather be friends, because if we got together and then broke up, I don't want you out of my life kind of reasoning for never wanting to cross that line.
I kind of still interpreted him saying, oh, I didn't want it to be awkward if we did break up or so on, as that's what he's telling himself right now, but that's not what he feels anymore. That to me is what he felt in episode 1. But I don't know if that still genuinely holds true. So that's why, even if we put Kan Johan completely aside as, a romantic interest or anything like that, I feel like it is a very natural point in Kim Go-eun's character arc to so badly want to go back to the way that he knew his life to be. She's the symbol of that. And he was grabbing onto her in the only way that he knew how, even when he wasn't necessarily content with that anymore.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so funny because, like, I totally get that impression as well. That seems to be like how it reads, and yet at the same time, I can see from the way that it's portrayed, I can see that the show was trying to, like, genuinely push them as the romantic pairing of the show. So it's like I'm like of two minds, because I'm like, on one hand, like, of course it would be him struggling to go back to the way he was. She's the symbol of that, and like all of that, like, of course this is what makes sense. But the show seemed to be going for something a little bit different. And it could also be one of the rare instances in that show where they probably should have elaborated a little bit more on the specific context. There are certain things here and there where I'm like, man, if we had just gotten, like, one more line from the character on this topic, we could have solidified and known so much more, volumes more, than what we're kind of left to feel around with. Which could very much be the case with them as well.
Because I feel like that's regardless of whether they intended it to be friendship that was unrequited love from one side, or if it was what I speculated to be. Either way, somewhere the show did fail because there's not clarity here. Okay, so unfortunately we had to cut our previous filming session a little bit short because my camera ran out of battery, as it's wont to do. And we, as we've now discovered, have way too much to say about the show. So we're going to be picking up from more or less where we left off. We can't quite figure out where that was. So we're just going to be recapping Brittany's screenshots for her favorite moments of cinematography, and then all my very many screenshots for this episode, because to me, this episode truly felt like the center of the season instead of episode 8, which you would kind of be expecting. But that's just a personal opinion. So anyway, for me, there was just a lot in this episode, and they kind of like pair off a little bit, which is why there's so many of them. But for example, like, color in this was a big one, in my opinion, where we kind of have the red and the blue coming back in. And it's funny because you mention that, like, the signs are a very big thing, and this was one of the times where, in my opinion, the signs like hinted to me where the episode might go, and I'm like, on the one hand, I feel like the guess was right. On the other hand, maybe not. But there in the one image you see Kan Yo-han and Kim Go-eun standing facing the window, and you have the big screen behind them that has the Foundation's logo on it. That looks like the hands reaching out to each other. So I was like over there, I'm like, the blue is Kim Go-eun, and he is he's gonna attempt to reach out to Kan Yo-han in this episode, which kind of I feel like I was like, yes, and they're gonna team up, which is weirdly sort of what they do for at least a decent part of the episode. I was sad to see it not continuing because we know that it ended in Kim Go-eun's entire worldview being destroyed. Which is so fun, just an everyday occurrence.
Oh yeah, you love it when you have to literally watch a character's alignment shift from lawful good to neutral good. Love that, love that. It's not a painful moment in the slightest.
No, not at all. And kind of to accompany that, we have Kim Go-eun in a lot of the scenes in the office. He's always like kind of opposed, like opposite to the red. He's never coming into the red, which then kind of like pays off later in the next episode when we see him like sitting front and center in front of the red part of the painting, which I just felt was like a nice touch, even if it maybe wasn't on purpose. But also, again, I wouldn't put it past the creators to do everything on purpose, just to torment me.
They really seemed obsessed with doing exactly that. Yeah.
Yes. And then again, when we get to Kan Yo-han, kind of like, okay, he's now gonna go in there and wreak havoc among the people who like think that they're standing together against him. You have him in the white jacket, which I thought was a nice touch and callback to Kim Go-eun with the white jacket.
It's
and
like
him
the most
like
white we ever see on Yoan, I feel.
Yes.
In that
And I feel
moment.
like it's and it's great because even though like obviously there's a million ways you can interpret it, I also feel like it's the one time that he genuinely takes on Kim Go-eun's approach, which feels like, oh, that's natural then that he would kind of wear something that we would generally associate with Kim Go-eun.
Yeah. And his approach literally right up until he gets, pulled into the president's office, which I don't think he's wearing the coat then. I think he's back to his tuxedo. Yeah. Like all up until then though, when he's doing like those dealings, it is in a much more white hat kind of way, especially for Yoan, because well, one, it's the biggest power move you've ever seen because he just sits there and lets them hang themselves. And it never gets old. It
was so satisfying.
Never gets old. All he had to do was like sit across the street at the other ones for like 7 minutes and it just unraveled. Yeah. So yeah, there are about a million reasons as to why you could think that Johan would be in that particularly light colored jacket. Hard agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I also love about this is as he's like approaching the offices, you get this beautiful shot of the two office buildings opposing each other. And again, we have the one that is kind of has these striking red features, and then the blue. And it's again kind of them facing off against each other, seeing whose morality will win.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm with you. Continue.
And then kind of just to put the nail in the coffin in terms of their things for me personally is then when they go into the prison where we now know what the end result is going to be. It starts out blue. It starts out with everything balanced and the way that Kim Go-eun was used to seeing it. And then the moment he steps through that door, it goes to red.
In oh. Oh, I hate how right you are. Yeah, this is once again a forest for the trees moment for me. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. No, that's fine. That's fine. You got anything else that I should have noticed on my, I don't know, fifth rewatch of this show that I did just the other day?
Uh, okay, so moving over to Suna,
Yes.
because I mean that was like, if you want to talk about the Kubrick stare, I feel like that was just that was the true moment of the Kubrick stare there at the end of that episode. But backtracking just a little bit, we have her obviously entering in the black, and yeah, no, you can kind of like wipe it away as, oh, it's just the funeral wear. But no, 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 that's her true character shining through for the first time ever. And it's so interesting because we have her when she goes to visit the orphanage.
Mm-hmm.
We have her for the first time in a mostly, like, predominantly um, black outfit with just a little bit of white camouflage remaining.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then you have her, making the grand entrance with the black suit, and everyone there is also in black, kind of like, obviously, again, you can just be like, oh no, it's a funeral, but my brain is like, this just signifies like how everyone is actually under her control, they just don't know it yet. um
Uh-huh.
and I,
Uh-huh.
I especially love it because they have one shot where she's like approaching, or like, let me just check, but I think she's either approaching or she's already on the podium. And then you have the black, the true her, juxtaposed with what she's showing the rest of the world, and that white, like, hope for the future-esque, banner that she has
Yeah.
at the back of her, which was just so great. Uh, but yeah, so that was everything to me already. But then I got stuck on the white dress because I'm like, that's a very interesting choice to make for a character whose clothes seem to signify a lot about her,
Mm-hmm.
And she wears white again, and she only wears full white two times, and it's in the scene where she kills the former foundation dude,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously in the final scene.
Yeah.
And the closest I could come, if we're gonna go with all my ridiculous clothing theories, is that was maybe the two times in her life that she felt she was actually doing the right thing for unselfish reasons, even if that wasn't necessarily the case. I
Hmm.
think that's the way she viewed it.
Ooh, interesting. My predominant kind of feelings towards it, although I've been trying to, like, I haven't arrived at like a firm this is what a firm belief as to precisely why. I just knew that it was very obviously significant. um
Mm.
and my but my current feelings, where I'm kind of leaning, is that for those two specific times, the pure white kind of references the brief times where she was pure in some sense. Like with the chairman. Um,
Mm-hmm.
very clearly, to me, it fits stronger with the chairman, in that she was very much a pure creature before he got his hands on her in whatever
Ah.
way. And therefore deeply symbolized by the red of his blood getting all over her white dress. Um,
Mm.
and then at the end, it was like, I still have a lot of fathoming to do about her end period to
Yeah.
begin with. Um,
Yeah.
because there are so many things, and I actually wish that they had been a little bit more specific about just one or two things.
Mm.
But in terms of the end, it was like she was kind of going back to where she kind of always regresses to mentally, and that she saw herself as so much purer back when uh, Johan saw her that way. And that at the end she was kind of regressing back to the beginning in that form of purity for her. Um, but also, there's also some other stuff that's really hard to like quantify. But I feel it kind of feels the most obvious as to why they put her in solid white um, when she killed the chairman.
Yeah, I think let me word what I wanted to say a little bit better because I remembered how I originally like phrased it when I was coming up with this theory in my head, obviously. I think for me, because I was also like thinking about, how she viewed herself as pure at the end, because I was like the two puzzle pieces didn't quite fit together for me. Um, and I remember that technically originally when she was going to have that meeting with them in the judge's court that had then been ambushed by Kan Johan later on, she was planning to become president of Korea. That was the goal she had set out for herself during that final scene originally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where my head was at realizing that is I'm like, to me it seems like the two times where she was wearing white is where she took it upon herself to take out the trash, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. 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 Hmm. That's also a really good point. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I get that. I get that. Yeah.
But yeah, so that I think I feel like that at least explains hopefully a bit more clearly what I tried to say first. But yeah, so that was all I could come up with the white, but it was nonetheless a very interesting scene. But yeah, so those are all my like color and sets and clothing analysis for
Mhm.
episode 7. I'm sorry there were so many, but there was a lot.
There are so many moments in every single episode that could be highlighted, so I'm trying to like purposefully highlight the less obvious ones. Um
Hmm.
and in episode 7, it was kind of going back to a theme that I had mentioned before, like how in episode 5 you had the shot of Kim looking down on Johan and Elia as they had their very tense moment, and what the show does with heights and one character looking down on another one, not in a haughty way, but in a one
Hmm.
character witnesses the other one in a very low moment, very hellish
Mm.
moment, you could even say, since the show is called The Devil Judge. You're witnessing kind of their own personal hell. And in episode 5, it was Kim looking
Yeah.
down at Johan in a difficult moment. And of course, at the end of episode 7, it is now Johan looking down on Kim as Kim's entire worldview and faith in his country and his system fundamentally cracks and crumbles around him. And because since
Hmm.
this had to have been cut off in that footage we lost, I'll say it again. It took me a little while to kind of realize, to kind of fathom the way that Johan holds space for people.
Hmm.
But especially because during your first watch, you're not sure where Johan even lands, so you've got a whole lot of stuff going on in your brain during the first rewatch.
Yeah.
But on like the next rewatch, it becomes much easier to kind of grasp how Johan isn't the nurturing and cradling and like physically comforting type, which makes
Mm.
perfect sense given who Johan is and his entire background and just his entire
Yeah.
character. But he still, like I said, holds space for people. he still gives people the opportunity to be like, feel your feelings. This is really hard. I know it's hard because I've been through hard shit too, in which I've looked exactly like that. So we're just I'm gonna be here, and I'm gonna let you do your thing. No judgment. Just do the thing, and I'll be here when you're done, and while you're going through it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really one, it's perfectly in character, obviously. But two, it's just such an interesting thing to watch somebody do, especially since it's someone who's the complete opposite. I see someone going through shit and I'm like, oh my god, let me hold you. I'm a sympathy crier, so it's like, let me sob along with you, right? What can I do? Do you need anything? Blah, 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 blah. I'm the polar opposite. And so,
that's me as well.
but to see the value in the way that Johan does it was really fascinating to me. Because it was so counterintuitive to me personally, but it still has its own form of support and compassion going on for it. Just displaying itself and surfacing in a much different way, in a way that makes much more sense for him. So just the simple shot alone of Kim down on his knees and Johan standing and watching and just letting Kim feel his very difficult feelings. That alone, I feel like needed to be highlighted because once again, they're doing the height thing. They're doing the levels, which I really, really love.
Yeah, and like it's so interesting that you mentioned that as well because I think I might have mentioned this in the previous time we talked about this, but it does also, it's, as you said, very in character. It doesn't feel contrived or anything like that, but it does also leave that ambiguity where you almost, you don't know how to interpret it, and because you're feeling all of, well, for me at least, I was feeling all of Kim Gon's pain, you interpret it in the worst way possible, which is a theme with this character that they use and utilize very effectively. And yet, like stepping back and listening to the way you interpreted this now, there's so many other times that he does the exact same thing that you don't necessarily know what to make of when you watch it the first time. I have a very specific scene that I'm thinking of that does this as well, but I'll mention it once we get to it.
That's an excellent point that I completely forgot to mention. On first watch, it does not look like this. It does not feel like it at all. You're like, okay, you could like do something, like, because you don't know where he lands. It reads totally differently the first time. Most things that they have Johan do, that they play perfectly in that ambiguity of, you don't really know, and you also don't fully understand Johan's character yet because there's so much that we don't know because it's like episode 7. It's very much just something you figure out in hindsight because the first time the ambiguity is perfect.
Yeah, and there's a lot to take in, so it's just
it's a lot. No, it's a lot. It's a lot. That's how we vastly underestimated our capacity for talking about this show because there's just so much all the time.
Yep.
Would that be it for episode 7? Are we heading into episode 8? So really, I guess it starts with the hospital visit and everyone's behavior during the hospital visit. Although actually, I do have a question for you. Because Johan says that like it wasn't so much the fire. I mean, although obviously the fire in their behavior was heinous. He's like, it was the morning after when they came to see me in the hospital. Is that what would have set you off for you as well? Like for you, is it more the morning after in the hospital or behavior at the fire? Or just really both that puts flames on the side of your face, makes you want to tear down a government?
I mean, I would like to say it would be like the afterwards. Knowing myself, it would probably be the moment, and then once I've had a chance to cool off, it would be the afterwards. Like both of them would affect me, but the thing that would sting and would fester, shall we say, would be the afterwards, because like I get very emotional in a moment. But the thing is, I can usually like parse my way back to logic. But as I parse, I get mad when even with logic, it's not like getting better. Like it's just becoming worse.
Yeah, it's like now that I've stopped to think about it, it's worse instead of yeah, no, I'm with you.
So yeah, for me personally as Janae, it would definitely like just build up. It wouldn't just be, oh, I can get it, it's fine. But then, oh damn, no, it's oh damn, oh freaking hell no.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah. See, like for me, I'm kind of like, well, once again, I'm not only a Gemini, but I'm bisexual. So I'm two minds about like literally everything. And like for me, it's like a little bit more interwoven in that for a lot of their behavior at the fire, I can be like, which I don't think I don't think Johan specifically mentioned this or the show specifically mentions this, but my kind of takeaway, part of my takeaway when Johan was like, it wasn't so much the fire, it was at the hospital the morning after, was that, because like with the fire, it's like people in desperate life-threatening situations go monkey brain. They go full like animal instinct. And so in like that respect, it's just animals panicking. And I can see how that's a little, because that's less, deliberate. Except for Cha and how she hurt Elia.
Yeah.
That
Cause
would be what set me off specifically about her, where I'd be like, you are going down first, you are going down hard, and even though I kind of fail when it comes to you eventually later on in the series, still not gonna feel all that bad. But for the but otherwise, even though we did see some of their bad behavior immediately following the fire, when they were just behaving like shitty rich people with ambulance workers and everything. Otherwise, it is very much, for everybody else, it's the hospital. For Cha, it starts right at the fire. And because it's the difference between, animals and rational thought. You all very clearly had a meeting this morning before you went to see Johan and was like, this is how we're going to play it, because we still want his money, and we're going to try to manipulate him into still giving it to us. So like, I'm sort of both-ish. Cha accidentally falls and then deliberately climbs over Elia. I think there's, when it comes to the hospital the next day, where necessarily is the fall versus the climb, if you know what I mean.
Well, I would say the fall is the church and the climb is the hospital.
Gotcha. Yeah. I was trying to put the fall and the climb both in the hospital afterwards. That's my own.
Yeah, sorry.
No. No, gotcha. I'm with you. I agree.
But I mean, if we do want to like see if there is a fall in the hospital versus a climb, I would say the sympathizing at the start was the fall, because it wasn't done in the best way, but you could kind of still see that in their own way they were trying to sympathize, and then it took a very sharp left turn the moment they started trying to use that emotional trauma bond to extract the money.
Yeah, because at first,
as you do.
Yeah. At first, they were all like, "God, that was terrible. That was horrifying. Thought I was gonna die." So about the donation that we could just still really need, we'll totally do everything we possibly can with the. No, I get you. Yeah, I agree.
Mm,
Um,
that scene.
yeah, no, that scene. See, this is the problem when you get like all the right actors and they're all like way too good. Because all of the actors they got for essentially like those big, was it 5 or 6 of the, most evil people? Um, Cha,
Hmm.
the two guys, obviously the guy they got for the president. Maybe it's just 4. Who am
Hmm.
I missing? The chairman, obviously. Um,
Oh yeah.
all just being way too good at being such a specific type of evil for each individual character,
Hmm.
and being so utterly believable, which is overall one of the things I love about the show, about how it's I may have mentioned this before, about how it's so heightened, it's classified as like kind of a
Mm.
melodrama. You have very extreme things going on in this whole
Yeah.
dystopian South Korea, but they got such good actors across the board that
Mm.
everything feels deeply anchored and a little bit too real. Um,
Yeah.
and that absolutely extends to the people they got to play the villains. Um,
Yeah.
it nails on a fucking chalkboard, that scene. You almost you almost can't believe their
Yes.
audacity, but you literally just watched Cha deliberately climb over Elia uh in in the church scene. So you're like, no, I believe it, yet at the same time I
Mm.
can't believe it. But then it relates to all this kind of
Hmm.
real world stuff that and all of a sudden you really can believe it. It
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um
No, they make me very angry, shall we say,
yes.
just to put it nicely.
And which this is also the episode where we get Johan's line about how it's the self-pity of the powerful that really, that is like one of the biggest things for him that makes him want to just blow up the
Mm.
world. And at first I wasn't entirely sure what he meant. I don't really know why. It's pretty clear. But at first I was like, yeah, I get that. But then like, what exactly do you mean? And then I think later on in the series there's a specific moment of, I don't even remember who it is. I think it might even be Cha.
Mm.
Um who tries to play the poor me card in a very like not great way. Because
I
obviously, even,
uh
rich people can have plenty of problems because money doesn't buy you like a
mm.
dad who loves you and that kind of thing. But, like,
Hmm.
when you see an incredibly rich and powerful people sit there and try to be like, well, I've had it so hard, and I just did all these evil things because I was surviving, and that kind of thing was when it
Hmm.
finally clicked into me what Johan really meant. And I absolutely agree because we see it happen all the time
Yeah.
in the real world, and we're just like, read the room. Like, maybe get some perspective on your position, please, and then get back to me. 'Cause it's,
Mm.
yeah.
But I think uh so you said you thought it was I think maybe it was when she was confronted by Kay and he was like, "You kind of caused the suicide of my father." And then she's like,
Yeah.
"But do you know how hard I had to work to get where I
Yeah,
am?"
it was that, and a little bit before that when she has that this is, we're talking episode 11 now. When
Mm.
she has that conversation with Johan, and she deliberately, like on purpose, tries to play the sympathy
Mm.
card of being like, you know how hard
Mm.
it's been trying to work my way up in this cold, brutal world. I've had to do cold, brutal things. And she's like deliberately acting
Mm.
emotional. It's a big hospital moment because she's entirely
Mm.
putting that on. And when it doesn't work, it just goes away. When Johan's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't really do that bullshit because it's bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And I
absolutely.
think
She does that a lot in episode 11, and you're like,
yeah.
no.
Doesn't feel great. No, and I think the thing that also hammers Kanyehan's point about, the self-pity of the powerful home more is the very clear knowledge that the audience has that all of these problems that they're complaining about are self-created problems. You know, it's not like a president coming here and complaining about, you know, a pandemic suddenly showing up out of nowhere and him struggling to handle it. That is not, the two are not comparable. Because again, the one virus is very much self-created. The other one, not so much.
Not really. No. Oh, yeah. Here's one of the great things about being a fangirl and just being like generally a shipper, and at least being a happy and sane one for me, involves a lot of, I acknowledge what the show is actually doing and actually saying to me. I therefore also see an opportunity for that to mean something else, and something else much more like queer and interesting to me that I can then exploit for shipping purposes. I'm very aware when I do this. It's like, it's a hobby at this point. It is a pastime, queering things that I know were not intentionally supposed to be queer. However, I'm a little of two minds on this, considering the show that we're talking about, because when Yohan and Suna have that scene in his office, and Yohan starts talking about how he doesn't discriminate. I am on one hand, he doesn't discriminate between men and women. On one hand, I am very aware that on the actual, like, textual front, that he is talking about how it's like, you think I won't hit a woman? I'll hit a woman. You think I, like, pull punches when it comes to female evil? No, I don't. But then, you know, obviously, it's a whole lot of fun to be like, yeah, he doesn't discriminate between men and women. That's a very bisexual thing for him to say, right? But the thing that makes me think that that interpretation may not be entirely in my own head is just because of the suggestive things that he is doing while he is saying that. Makes it walk a very fine line. And considering the other things that this show pulls in a queer sense, like, I don't know, episode 1 and the whole collar moment thing, stuff like that, makes me be like, you know, I think if I had to sit down with the creator of this series, the writer of this series, that would be like in the top 5 things I asked him. Be like, so when Yohan said he doesn't discriminate, did you deliberately blur the line there? Or am I, like, inventing things? Because I'm okay with inventing things. I'm just curious. Does that moment strike you as ambiguous at all? Or are you very much like, we are deliberately being like, yes, that looks gay, even though you know that it was, you know, not intended to be so?
I think it was deliberately vague. Because a couple of reasons. Obviously, my shipper heart wants it to be deliberately vague.
You know?
But also, like, we acknowledged the normal context that it has because we have something similar happening with Kim Go-eun at one point where he says, like, I don't discriminate. I can't remember when that was, but I'm pretty sure there was an instance like that way early on when they were still kind of starting to get to know each other. I think it was maybe even in episode 1, roundabout when the bus scene happened. But I could be making that up. Anyway, but I think there was something similar to that happening. And then we have, again, kind of like the juxtaposition of he did this to Kim Go-eun first. So you are, like, the show is almost acknowledging that you're supposed to take a mirroring from this, in my opinion. With Suna, we have him kind of like brushing his hand up her arm to reach her neck. And in a similar way, we have in the first or the second episode him pushing Kim Go-eun against the bookshelf and then like to kind of like brush it off and make it seem like it's not a big deal, we have him smoothing out the collar.
That was episode 1.
So
That was episode
episode
1.
1.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I still can't believe it, but yeah.
And I do feel like there's very specific mirroring because he really enjoys slamming people up against things and like
which that goes into a whole other headcanon of mine. Continue.
But yeah, so I do think there's definitely like elements of that, and because of the sensual nature with which he approaches these moments of aggression, being the like arm stroking and the collar fixing thing, I do feel like there is supposed to like take my words as they are, but notice the subtext there.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that he approaches the actual physical demonstration, shall we say?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and in a sense, he could also be saying, I don't discriminate, in that a kind of a secret third thing that he could be saying, I guess, is that, I'll use these, just like you said, I'll use the same tactics on men that I use on women, whether, it being seduction or I have to, like, literally end you. Which, good for him.
That's actually another thing that I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding me.
Oh.
But I think somewhere at the start of the show I said, oh, she's the Moriarty to his Sherlock, talking about Suna towards Kan Yo-han. And there's a lot of times where they kind of like mirror the two of them. And I think this could maybe also, like, this to me contributes to why I'm like, I think there's both sides have weight, and that, it's just take it as it is, and there is a lot of ambiguity and subtext. Is I very much got the sense that she wasn't really discriminatory about her preferences. There were some very intense moments with men, and there were some very intense moments with women. And I don't think she would have cared about the gender either way if it meant getting to her goal. And I think he and she share that, in my opinion.
Yeah, because this is also the episode where we get, it's not their first scene together, but it's like their first actual, like, sit down, we're deliberately hanging out together, Suna and Jinju. And then you have the whole, like, necklace in front of the mirror moment, and I'm like, we're getting really, which is deliberately reminiscent of the way that Yoan handles things. And I wonder if that's something that Suna deliberately copies from Yoan, because there are certain things that she definitely does, because does copy in her own way and like for her own reasons, because she thinks that she knows who Yoan is.
Yeah.
And so she's interpreting his certain actions as this one thing, and then like she adopts those tactics in the way that she interpreted them, not the way that he was actually
intending them.
Intending them, like what like the truth was. Which just in yet another way makes her a very dark mirror to him, and he wasn't exactly, the brightest mirror to begin with.
Yes.
Yeah. Deeply exemplified by that whole scene with Jinju. Because apparently Suna doesn't really deeply discriminate either. That was my vibe. And it was another
mine
neck
as
moment.
Well.
It was another neck moment. I'm just putting this together now. These bisexuals and their necks. Like, what is... God. Oh, so we finally meet the crew. We finally get in this really last attempt to keep pulling Kim onto his side because he's so close now. Yoan is so close. Kim was like right there. He actually introduces Kim to his team. His like full team and not just Kay. And we get all those fun little reveals, like the lawyer, the prosecutor being in on it, which blew my fucking mind. That's like he's a low-key, he's like an MVP of the show.
Yeah,
with
he
everything that
definitely
they have him
is.
do. I'm like, I kind of love you. You're fantastic.
Yes.
And then the actress, and then there was that the cop higher up above Soo-yeon, who we already knew was working for Yoan. But I guess I didn't get the sense that he was like part of the team. I think they may have, when they showed that in an earlier episode, I think it was more of an implication of like maybe he was like corrupt in some kind of way as opposed to like working with Yoan. And just that whole scene of, once again, it's like in all the little ways up until now that Yoan had kept like showing us who he really is, and the show has kept showing us who Yoan really is. It's like this, for very understandable reasons, was like one of the biggest moments so far. It's like, no, he's not some power-hungry asshole. He has teamed up with these people who have been as wronged as he has been wronged to take down a deeply corrupt system, and this is what they're working towards. On a first viewing, I think, if I remember correctly, I still had, just because I knew this was a twisty, crazy-ass show, I was like, okay, this makes me feel a lot better, in that he might be, the whole going for the whole Dark Knight thing, like I'm hoping he is. Not that I don't love Hannibal, but just in this specific instance, I'm like, if he could turn out to be ultimately good, that would be awesome. And I was like, this makes me feel a lot better being introduced to his team, but little voice in the back of my head is like, yeah, but there could still be like something wrong. Just something wrong. And there were still, because at this point you still have some questions that haven't been answered yet. So I feel like even though there's this big reveal, which is a great step in the right direction, in the Dark Knight direction, really, still doesn't entirely, at least I wasn't being like, oh, okay, he's a good guy. All right, I'm fine. I am confident in this fact now. Because I wasn't. How did that whole thing go over with you in terms of Yoan and perceiving Yoan?
Pretty positively. I don't think I was like fully, oh, he can do no wrong. But I there were two things about it that kind of like swung me towards, I think that even if he does wrong, he's doing it for the right reasons that we can't yet see. Was weirdly because of the way that the other people viewed him, not so much about like, it's because, number one, somehow he managed to connect with all of these people, and I just didn't think that they would trust in him to the extent that they did if they didn't have a legitimate reason to, because they'd already been lied to by a lot of higher ups. They would naturally be cautious when being approached by another person who is like claiming not to be like the others. So I felt like the fact that they trusted him was a massive like tick in his favor. And then another thing that really won me over, and I want you to check something else, because I think there's a scene that we didn't like quite cover yet, but that I'm wondering if it's in this episode. But one thing that did win me over is when, I think it was the prosecutor who said, we know that what we're doing isn't right. We're willing to take the punishment afterwards, but we need to do this kind of like for the greater good. But yeah, so that for me was very comforting, but because it told me that unlike the counterparts that you would prescribe to them, like unlike the counterparts that you kind of seen, oh, this is the counterpart that Suna has for to Kanyohan's people. She doesn't see what she's doing wrong, and if she does, she doesn't care. Whereas, the fact that they were like, we are aware, but we're willing to take the responsibility, because that was another thing that really is made clear from the president and all his people, is they are not willing to take the responsibility. They always push the responsibility off onto other people. And so it felt like a very grounding moment, and I think that's what ultimately had me rooting for Kanyohan, where I was like, I think that even if he does wrong things, I'm gonna try and give him the benefit of the doubt from here on out, because I don't think all of these people are wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely a big win for the Dark Knight hopefuls. And I mean, it's still, and that's one of the great things about the show, is that it's still like, when it tries to come back around towards the end, and we start revisiting like the fire and who caused it, and ultimately, once and for all, did Johan kill his brother, set the fire, what have you, and like what really happened. There's still, I guess, especially by then, because by then it's like episode 15, right? There's still just enough doubt in the viewer's mind, or at least this viewer's mind. There's still just enough doubt as to when they start like rehashing that, and it starts coming back around in a "we are going to answer this question" way. I'm still sitting there like, he didn't, right? Like, I don't think he did, but like he didn't, right? Like, there's still that tiny little thing in the back of my mind that you then feel bad for once you actually finish the series, and you're like, damn, I really was just like everybody else. Because at that point, you have that little voice in the back of your head that's like overwriting everything you've seen from Johan so far. It's like all of like the good Dark Knight stuff. Everything you've seen with him and Elia, like, alone, should be speaking to this man's overall psyche, and everything we've learned about him and how he's been categorized as a monster since he was a child for something that he did to actually protect somebody else, which just speaks to the entire show. And all of that is still ignored enough to still be doubting that maybe Johan really did do something deeply and actually wrong that he is now ashamed for. And but that's still I've now derailed into like, I will constantly be apologizing to Kang Johan for being like, oh, I fell into the same trap that everybody else fell into there for a while. I feel very Kim in that way. Because Kim does the same thing. I mean, granted, a very elaborate show is played out in front of his eyes, and I kind of don't fault him the way that some other people in the fandom seem to fault him, especially given everything that's going on with him. But yeah, it's just a whole, it's a delicate balance, this show.
Yeah, and it's difficult as well, because I remember now when I was watching episode 15, before we found out everything, I felt very much like I don't see this man going in and deliberately doing anything. I thought if he was in some way responsible for the fire, I thought, okay, perhaps he had started a small fire or something like that in order to get everyone out of the church, so he could talk sense into his brother before the donations went through or something like that. Or that he was like trying to lure out the politicians' true nature is to show his brother, like, you're making a mistake. Please don't do this. But at that point, I was like, I don't. He's not. He's not actually like guilty in the sense that he deliberately went and murdered his brother.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I was still like, I didn't think of the possibility that it was Elia.
Yeah. And what's funny is that even when we're shown that during the fire, we see his reaction to the fire because he's outside the building. You know, he's walking by, he, and then he turns and he sees that the entire fucking church is on fire, and he is obviously, like, very clearly surprised by that. But what's funny is that the way that this show plays out so brilliantly is that you're not sure if his story about all of that is reliable or not. And you're like, if it is a case of an unreliable narrator, which parts aren't exactly true and which parts are, only to find out that it was entirely a reliable narrator the whole time. Yeah. So even though you're like, at least in my brain, even though it was like, well, we saw him react to the fire, it was like, but was that just some of his bullshit that they're now going to unveil in this devastating twist? That he actually killed his... I don't know. This show played me like a fiddle, let me tell you. They really... Every single thing that I was supposed to fall for, have doubts on, not entirely trust the first time around, just everything. I fell into every single pothole on this street. Just all of them. Maybe that's why I also have a little bit more sympathy for Kim, because, like, did the exact same thing.
Yeah. No, I have to say, like, I will leave the discussion for Kim's reaction on your channel, but there was a lot, and I got very frustrated with him, but I was so frustrated because it made so much sense.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of emotions. But where were we before we were talking about the fire?
Yeah, we did kind of veer off. Well, now it's like, of course, we have to talk about the big power couple moment. And to talk about that, there's also the conversation leading into it. And Johan says, I didn't, switch out the prisoners, but I would have if that's what it would have taken to get you on my side. And and that methodology isn't going to change if you decide to, hop on my team instead of Jung-Oh's. And then that leads right into kind of setting you up for a switch there, because you would think, okay, Kim's not going to go along with that. And then it turns out, no, actually he will go along with that. And the way he tells Jung-Oh that, like, one, he's like, you forced me, you gave me an ultimatum, and you're making me choose. So I'm going to go with the side that at least has some chance of winning, because I like to be on the winning side. And I'm like, you fucking go. And then, of course, you have the whole peak power couple moment of Kim and Johan standing across the street and looking back at Jung-Oh as Jung-Oh is looking at them. And one of the things, aside from, like, the really great fangirlish things that we're absolutely going to get to, in my latest rewatch, so super recently, it's like I would actually have to sit down and write out all the different things that are being communicated and misinterpreted by the different characters, mostly Jung-Oh. Like, Jung-Oh is looking at this moment of Kim teaming up with Johan, of all things, and he is taking this as a much more, like, nefarious moment than he really is. To Jung-Oh, it's like, because Jung-Oh doesn't even believe that Johan is trying to do anything for the greater good, right?
Anything good.
For Jung-Oh, this is my protege has just gone dark side.
Moment. No, definitely.
And
it's framed that way.
Yeah, and like and when for the viewer and for Kim and Johan, we're finally like, yes, let's Dark Knight this bitch. Yes, let's go. Finally, yeah. power couple, boyfriends. Let's go, clean up Korea. Whereas for Jung-Oh, it's a much more sobering moment. I feel for him because he has no idea who Yoan really is. He never bothered trying to establish that.
Yeah, never
at all. I don't even think he really. Does he know about Elia's existence at all?
I don't think we never even. Do we even see them share a scene? Like an actual scene where they talk?
No, I think the closest we get is literally at the end of episode 15 when they're in essentially the same place at the same time. But I think if he knows about Elia, it's literally just like in name only, which means he gets to project and spin that in any way that he wants because that's like what he does. But then of course from a fangirlish moment, I was dead. I was on the floor. I was just like, they lingered on this power couple shot for like a million years. And I'm over here like, yeah, I'll soak this up for a million years. This could be the entire next episode. I am okay with this. And that's not even getting into what happens on the bridge, like immediately after, which I literally cannot handle. But just for the power couple moment, how did that go for you? I know how it went for me. I was unconscious, but how was that for you?
I was experiencing a very confusing mixture of dread and elation. Because I was like, look at all this red. He's gone dark side. I was literally in frickin' mentor dude's headspace. And then I was like, but they look so good together. And I was also like, I was happy because even though I was, I think I was more horrified because I saw the way that Min Jung-ho was interpreting it, and I was like, you're not getting it because there's so much to it, and it was just satisfying after all the turmoil that we'd had from Kim Go-eun up until that point with regards to where he stood with Kan Yo-han, that it was almost like a relief watching him finally make a choice.
Yeah.
So it was just a lot of emotions, and they looked very good together while I was experiencing it. So.
Who could say? And then immediately followed by that is that moment on the bridge in which I swear to fucking God, like I swear, whenever Kim, Yoan asks him, it's like, do you regret doing what you just did? And Kim, who essentially says no, but then he says basically like I wanna actually like fight the criminals, like fight corruption for a better Korea. Basically, I'm really paraphrasing, but that's really what he said. And Yoan's face, Yoan's whole ass body reaction, I was like, are you gonna kiss him right now? Because it looks like you could. It looks like you want to. Like, it was this whole mixture of, like, affection and pride, and, like, I'm like, you're about to, like, pin him to the car. Like, what is this? It's a very specific expression that, he actually gets, a similar one, I think 1 or 2 episodes later, when, Kim is, like, taking initiative and being a badass, and they're in the hallway, and he walks away, and Yoan looks over his shoulder with, like, so much pride and affection that I'm like, are you gonna do something about this?
And like, there was another scene where I distinctly got the impression, and I'm so sorry, but I distinctly got the impression that Kan Yo-han was turned on, was during the scene where he was, you say, what money can turn a person or something like that, like right before they try and get the golden bars to manipulate.
No, we can't talk about the golden bars scene yet. We'll be here all day, but yes.
But before that, like
Uh-huh.
when he's suggesting that move, and there's this look that he gives, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah, no, I know
sir,
exactly what you're
get
talking
a room.
about. Yeah, where it's like it's such a great combination of where he's like, "Really?" He's like, "This is the angle we're going to take," but at the same time he's like, "I could kind of bend you over right now." At the same time, no, that's one of my favorite Yoan expressions, like, period, in the
Oh
entire
goodness.
series. It's like, honestly, that and like his face that he gets on the bridge are like just two of the best like shots of
Hmm.
Yoan kind of ever. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And oh yeah, agree, big agree. There were other
But
people in the room, but if there hadn't been for that suggestion, uh huh.
But talking about the bridge scene, it was interesting rewatching that. I realized because I was like vaguely skimming through things when I was grabbing the screenshots,
Mm-hmm.
and rewatching it, realizing that when you look at the bridge scene, there's again our standard blue and red lighting on like very like there's a very distinct line.
I'm like, this is hilarious because
Um,
I will spot their black and white fuckery like every damn day. But for some reason, until now, I have been utterly blind to the blue and red. So every time you bring it up, I'm like, did they have that in there? I guess it did. You know, I don't know. Possibly the strongest color metaphor for your OTP that you haven't noticed at all until now.
So there's literally like almost a split screen of the blue light and then the red light,
Oh my god,
and
it is. It's like, yeah, blue
and
and red. There's a
both
little
of
bit of
them,
yellow in there, but there's
yeah,
very distinctly blue and red bullshit going on. Uh huh.
uh, and both of them are on the red side.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. Yeah, I cannot. See, at least, okay, at least in my defense for this, I wind up hyper focusing so much on them that, like, is there really anything else in this shot? I don't think there is. I could make a strong argument for the rest of the screen just being black and it literally just being Kim and Yeon staring at each other. That's, you know, we just
I mean,
interpret
to be
things in
fair,
different ways sometimes.
in a lesser show, that would be all that we focused on.
You- Once again, 1000% correct.
Okay, so I have two shots here. The one is kind of one that I already referenced in the previous episodes of discussion, where we have the power move of Kim Gon sitting in Kanyeon's place
Yeah.
with the focus on him sitting in front of the redness of the painting. And that was the moment that I knew that whatever happened next, he was gonna go with
Mm,
Kanyehan.
mm-hmm,
It
mm-hmm.
like it was such a statement, and I do feel like it was a moment of Kim Gon like taking a little bit of his power back, like, okay, yeah, we're gonna play by your rules, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna look hella good while doing it. Sorry.
Yeah, no, no.
Um,
It is a real kind of like glow up moment for him because he's been
mm,
um yanked around in so many directions and trying to figure out, what's right, what's not, who's Yoan, what this country really is, and just so many different things that but that that him sitting behind there alone and then him telling
mm.
Jungho essentially where Jungho can shove it and just this whole end of this episode was a really like we are reminded that it's like okay, but Kim is his own like capable adult person and he may be,
Yes.
the mentee in this mentor-mentee relationship, but that doesn't mean that, he has his own cards that he can deal. And it was extremely attractive in the way that he was already just more assertive and having finally made a
Mm,
decision. I feel like that decision gave
yeah.
him a lot of it gave him a lot of confidence. And like why wouldn't it? He
Yeah.
finally like just like he said, he's like finally found a team that can win in the face of all of this massive ugliness. So he's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm doing the right thing, I'm joining the right team, and I'm going to have the straight posture and general wherewithal that shows it off. And it's like, good for you. Good for him.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love that moment because the choice was really what gave him the control.
Yeah.
And I love that it was such a striking scene and it was so beautifully done.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. So that was the one. And then the other one, the joyful moment where Suna officially puts a collar on poor Jojo. So yeah, so this was where I was like, okay, no, this is where things are gonna start going bad because it was again that jewelry like kind of claiming the person thing that we talked about with the watch,
Yeah.
but in a much more almost grotesque way because it very much felt like where you almost didn't notice the gifting of the watch in the first like obviously for very gay reasons we do, but you don't really like think too much about the watch in the first viewing, whereas even in the first viewing for me the necklace scene was very invasive. It felt wrong, and that's where it really to me is one of those things that you mentioned of Suna seeing something done by Kan Johan and putting her own very grim spin on it. So yeah, that was it. It definitely where the watch felt like an extension of a hand from Kan Johan. It did feel very much like a collaring of a dog
Yeah, I was about to
from
be like, this is a
Suna.
leash. Yeah.
Yeah,
And not to mention,
so
we'd
it
seen
was.
Suna, and I don't think that exact set, but we'd seen Suna in Pearls before. Um, yeah, it felt very much like a claiming, like a you are like me now, and a I will now use you to my own ends in a way that feels so different from the way Johan has essentially been courting Kim for the past 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Even though there are some similarities, but it was like with Johan, you're not entirely sure. You're like, how predatory is this exactly? And like, what kind of person is Johan? Whereas by now, we know who Suna is.
Yeah.
We are very keenly aware, and I love that. I mean, I love that they did what they did with Jinju for about a million different reasons.
Yeah.
But yet another reason why it made perfect sense was because it was like they were showing you here's what an actual like predator prey type of relationship
Yeah.
dynamic mentor thing looks like. Notice, compare and contrast with what Kim and Yohan have been having going on this entire time. Doesn't it feel just like a little bit different? Just a little? You're like, yeah, but the first time you watch, you have no brain cells, and by you, I mean me. So that hadn't even, occurred to me until one of my many rewatches.
But yeah, and it's like there's so many layers to it as well because we again we have Kim Gon readily accepting the watch,
Yeah.
whereas uh, Judge O actually tries to like kind of create a boundary,
Mm-hmm.
and Suna still crosses it, and you don't see her without a necklace from then on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and it's very specific because it tipped me off on her turnaround in the episode where she does turn around because you have her wearing two distinctly mismatched necklaces where she'd only ever worn one before.
Ooh, I noticed like her suit thing going on when she's like almost all too far gone. I noticed that. I hadn't noticed about her two necklaces before. I'm gonna have to look that up later. That is
Um,
exactly the kind of bullshit this show pulls.
It's the best thing because it literally she's not wearing two necklaces before the mysterious door opening that we don't immediately get payoff for,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the next scene that you see her, she has the two necklaces on.
I love this show. I love this show and all the bullshit it pulls. And it pulls so much. All of it, pretty much. It just pulls all the bullshit. And it's so satisfying. I'm totally looking that up
Mhm.
later. Yes, continue. Was that it? What you
Um,
got? Throw it at me.
but yeah, that's more or less it. It was just like that scene kind of blew my mind because I hated every single moment of it, but that
Oh
was where
yeah.
I officially was like, no, no, no. My jewelry theory is a thing. I don't even care anymore. I sound ridiculous. We're gonna keep going. And it paid off. I predicted her turnaround because of the freaking necklaces. So
Oh, nice. Yeah, once again, every pothole, I hit every pothole. I did not realize that she turned around until they showed that she turned around, and I was like, yeah, yeah. Hadn't put together anything at all. My shot is an aquarium shot, but
oh,
very close
it's so
runner up,
beautiful.
especially since
Hmm.
I think this is the one red/blue thing that I have actually effectively noticed so far. So, yay for me. But when I was choosing a screenshot for this, obviously you could go with the power couple shot because why wouldn't you? Like, duh. And even though I was like, I'm trying to maybe highlight some more underrated ones, like I said, but then I realized something about the power couple shot, and I was like, I kind of want to make it just so I can brag about noticing a red thing, but which I'm sure you noticed about 1.5 million years ago, like the first time you watched it. But the power couple shot, I was like, because I was thinking, I was like, why do they have this big moment happening? Like they're standing behind Johan's car. Like this isn't exactly a very like visual thing for such a big badass moment. And then I realized that the fucking brake lights along from top to bottom going along Johan's car were red and were absolutely framing Johan in particular, but still in that. So they went for a whole red brake light thing, and I almost threw something because you're so unbelievably right about the red and blue thing, and I was so unbelievably blind to it until we started talking about this show. So I almost wanted to go with that one, but I went with this shot of, Johan's
It's
group
beautiful. Mm,
sitting with the aquarium so big and beautiful behind them. And what's funny is that
yeah.
on one of my rewatches for this show, I stopped on this scene and I was having a hard time figuring out why they were here specifically.
Mm,
Because, by that time you obviously pick up that, so many things are deliberate with this show, and they wouldn't do
mm,
something this striking for no reason. They wouldn't be like, oh, well, the
yeah.
aquarium's pretty, let's do that. And I was like, but what's the thing? Like, for some reason I was having a hard time accessing like why they decide to do this. And I was actually talking
Mm,
to, I believe it was Lila, I'm almost certain it was Lila, on the Gaywatch Discord,
mm-hmm.
because we're both obsessed. And I was like, what are your thoughts about this whole aquarium thing? Because for whatever reason my brain's not wrapping around it, and so I entirely credit her with this interpretation because she's dead
Okay.
ass right. So they put them here specifically with all these, beautiful fish, and I think there may even be one or two smaller sharks in there. I can't remember.
Mm,
Um, because and it's such a great reason, and it makes so much sense. It speaks to how what they are doing is so much
mm.
bigger than they are. There is a whole ocean of
Ooh.
people out there who they are doing this for, but it's so much bigger than just them and their trauma and their revenge and their justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And So they put them here to really communicate the bigness of who and what they're doing this for. And that is so genius, and I feel so stupid for not picking that up. But she was so right, and I cannot unsee it because it's so right. And so therefore I had to absolutely highlight it for this, because that's one, a gorgeous shot. It's a beautiful choice for a backdrop for any scene, but the metaphor at work behind it just knocks me over. And this very quickly became one of my favorite shots just in the show, because it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, like I had also wondered like what is the reason behind it. My thoughts vaguely went to because they have quite a few other shots that reference mafia vibes. My thoughts went to perhaps that. But I feel like the metaphor makes a lot more sense. Do you think it could also be like going along with that metaphor, like a big small fish in a big pond, like big fish in a small pond kind of thing?
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I had not thought of that, like any of that at all. That's so cool.
Yeah, especially because there's a big stingray in there, but especially if I cannot remember if there are actually a couple of sharks in there. I think there is. It's just very small ones. But you can see up through the top. Like you can see, well, one, the top of the water, and then two, like the boundaries and everything. So it is very clearly a small pond. So yeah, no, I think that could definitely be part of it. Yeah.
But yeah, I love that the what she said. That's
Oh yeah.
I think that works.
Yeah. But yeah,
But
no,
yeah,
that.
I'll check.
Oh, her office. I noticed a very obvious thing about her office that you probably already knew about because you pay attention to sets anyway. Her fucking office, asymmetrical. The whole ass design is asymmetrical. It is off. There is something wrong with that office, and it is because it was built, like the walls were built asymmetrical. And I was like, that is unbalanced. It is an unbalanced office. Yeah.
I didn't really register it because I was just like, it's confused. It's fine. Whereas
it's fine.
Whereas like if it was symmetrical, it would have drawn my eye a little bit more.
Oh, interesting.
But I will go look because that's an interesting thought. I feel like it fits right into her personality, so I would not be surprised.
Oh yeah, no, I like screamed when I realized it. I forget why. I was just like sitting there. I think it was maybe during a rewatch. And I was just like sitting there and I was like, wow, God, she's weird. And I was like, wait, because there was like a wide shot of the offices from very high. And I was like, wait a second. This bitch's office is asymmetrical. The international implications. Oh, it was so good. So even the office is wrong. Even the office is unhinged. Yeah. Yeah, I'd been meaning to bring that up.
Okay, and miraculously, we have actually managed to finish with the parts over here on my channel. So yeah, this is the end of episode 8. We are going to be doing 9 to 16 over on Brittany's channel whenever we get to it. Basically, we're trying our best here, but again, we vastly underestimate the show and how much damage it can do to us and our time management skills.
I mean, vastly. We were like, yeah, we'll sit down one Sunday afternoon, 3-4 hours. We'll get through the whole show. It'll be great. Incorrect. Continue. Incorrect. Yeah.
So yeah, I will link those once they do become available, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please remember to check out Brittany's channel. It's amazing. You will not be disappointed, I promise. And yeah, otherwise, I'll see you guys again next time. 再见。